Time having arrived, I call the meeting to the Finance Committee to order for today, Monday, November 18th. It's a little past 7. If you could just please rise and help us salute our beautiful flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Well, councilors and guests, we have a lengthy agenda, so without further ado, first of all, welcome everybody. Without further ado, Mr. Clerk, agenda number 1, please. Item 1, we have the reappointment of Mr. Matthew Stanton of Brockton, Mass. to the War Memorial Board of Trustees for a 3-year term ending in October 2027. Invited, Mr. Matthew Stanton. Mr. Mayor and Mr. Stanton, welcome.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I am so excited to put the reappointment before all of you. Mr. Stanton is one of the non-veteran members. As you know, it's a 5-member board. 3 are vets and 2 are non-vets. Ms. Units is the other non-vet, but he comes to everything, comes to every meeting. He was just marching with us in the parade for Veterans Day. So I wholeheartedly support this, and I ask you to reappoint Mr. Stanton. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Stanton.
Good evening. It is an honor to be here, and it is an honor, more of an honor to serve as a trustee to the War Memorial Building. When I first was appointed, the mayor actually, we found these books over at the War Memorial and minutes from past meetings, and almost 96 years to the day, this council, or that council, put into place the first war memorial. Well, it wasn't a war memorial then, but the Board of Trustees that would be in charge of ensuring that the War Memorial Building was built, and as we see, it is. So it's an honor to sit here 96 years later, knowing that that Board of Trustees is still in place, and I believe doing a good job.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Councilor Castro.
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Stanton.
Good evening,
Mr. Stanton, since we both serve on the lovely Beautification Committee, you've had an opportunity to express to me the importance of the War Memorial Building. Perhaps you would share that with my colleagues.
To me, it is just, as I sit in this chamber and you look and it is beautiful, the War Memorial Building is just as beautiful in my eyes. When I was a little kid, my grandmother, if we drive by, we'd stop and look at it. It represents the greatness of our city, the greatness of our country. Without the men and women that serve our country, and that building represents, you may not be here doing what you do. We need to thank them every day for what they do. I know Council Thompson, Council President, as a non-veteran member, I am in awe. When I was a kid, I didn't play sports. I had a job. And, veterans were my heroes. My brother, my older brother, now my nephew. Always been.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, ma'am. Anybody else? Councilor Devancourt.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Obviously, you know, I'm one of those that don't really speak on behalf of people like that. And obviously, when I see somebody, you know, who has been committed day in and day out, you know, for the sake of our city, like the mayor acknowledged, and I think, you know, this young man right here is an example. And obviously, you know, I know you way before politics, and I think, you know, I will know you way after politics, and I think that if there is someone that I believe who can actually, you know, do an excellent job when it's come down to this building is this man right here. And for that reason, I just want to acknowledge, you know, publicly my full support behind your reappointment. And if there is anything that we can do, we mean the City Council, you know, to make this appointment better, I'll be more than happy to work with you. I know you are determined. I know you like this city, and obviously, you know, I see you everywhere.
I appreciate that.
Whether you have to be there or not, you are always there. And I even see you here, even on the council meetings. And with that being said, Mr. Chairman, I would like to motion to recommend this favorably.
Second.
On the motion, Councilor Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good evening, Mr. Stanton. And thank you for, again, stepping forward to serve on this important board. I had one question regarding the War Memorial itself. We just, spent, I believe, $11 million on renovating it. $4 million. Okay.
Yeah, under,
Let's see.
I was going to say under.
Okay,
under 5,
11. Okay, 4. Still a significant amount of money, and it did a lot of good work. I was able to take a tour after the renovations. But what about activation? Over, say, the next year or so, what can we expect to see happening in the War Memorial?
That I don't want to speak, personally I can speak to, we have a meeting coming up this week where on the agenda is, getting it ready for rental. We want to bring this back to the community. Too many people, I think, only see it on Memorial Day, Veterans Day, things like that. And I mean it. It is a beautiful building. I've given a few people tours of it after a parade or something like that, and I haven't seen one person that doesn't. It turns people into a little kid when you go through that building. You're in awe, every corner of it. So we want to kind of bring it back to the city, make it rentals, obviously for veterans groups, to come together. That's what it was originally meant for. This book goes back 106 years when it was first thought of. That building was thought of 106 years ago. And I believe in about 6 years, it'll be coming up on its 100th anniversary. I think the city should do something. Whatever Board of Trustees is sitting then should really look into making a spectacle out of it, because it is a spectacle.
Definitely. It's got a beautiful theater inside there, and, it'd be great to see some type of show. I know we have members of our school committee here. Love to see the kids perform in that building. That'd be amazing. So I really like to see it activated over this next year or so.
I am glad you brought that point up. When you walk through that building, you see all the different rooms and the things that are in those rooms. And it makes sense, and I think we've talked about it a couple times. Once we really get into it, we had to wait till after the renovations, but maybe dedicating some room to almost like a museum quality, where different schools could come and go through it. And I would be remiss if I did not thank Kelly Young and her staff over there for the work that they have done. There are so many records in there. There are records of every serviceman that fought in World War I, World War II from Brockton. The USO, I believe, probably clipped out if a soldier's name from Brockton was in a newspaper, they clipped it out and put it on a card, and it's there. And Kelly and her staff are digitizing them, so they'll be available. It's a great asset for schools, school projects, things like that. The community, the whole community.
Yeah. Well, it's definitely an asset to the city of Brockton. It's a beautiful building, and I just like to see more activities out of that building, so people can come check it out and experience what you and me and everybody who's been in there has experienced. So
I think after this renovation that was recently completed, I think it was September 12th that they cut the ribbon. That's what we're looking forward to do.
Great, and then maybe next year, early next year, Mr. President, Mr. Chairman, we could file a resolve, bring the full Board of Trustees before us, and just have a conversation about what we'd like to plan in this building over the next year or two.
Councilor, just a couple points of information, and thank you for your service. I know you're a veteran of the Navy. Just this week, we extended the parking lot. We had taken some trees down. We asphalted it this week because of the weather. We are still actively moving some of the BEMA supplies that we had from the pandemic. We donated some to the hurricane relief efforts in North Carolina and Florida, just recently with BEMA bringing it to Canton and also the Barnstable Sheriff's Office, and it's been driven down. One thing that we're working on as a as a committee, as a board, and as mayor vis-a-vis, I chair the board, we are trying to figure out the logistics of having people there at nighttime. That seems to be an issue that we're going to be talking about this week, and Mr. Stanton's right, we're scheduled for this Thursday, and we will have a regular scheduled meeting. But, you know, we spent a lot of money on it, $4 million, a ton of money. It's an unbelievable building. The technology input is key, and so we hear what you're saying, and we're also going to have additional space when the public safety building opens because Beam will be shifting over across the street. So we 100% agree with you on that.
So the night issue, is that a lighting issue in the parking lot or along?
No, it's actually having custodial staff there, having staff there to be able to work the functions. But I made a pledge that, you know, we're going to utilize that just like the Shaw Center. COA will be moving soon, and, you know, we've put a lot of money into that. Now we want to reap the benefit of those assets.
Right. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Stanton, again, thank you for your service.
Thank you for your
service. And thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilor. And I'm glad you brought that up because that's something I wanted to bring up as well. A motion has been properly made in second to recommend this item favorably to the entire City Council. All those in favor? Anyone opposed? It carries. Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
Number 2.
The appointment of Mr. Abraham Belize of Brockton, Mass. to the Brockton License Commission for a 3-year term ending in October 2027. Invited, Mr. Abraham Belize.
Mr. Belize, Mr. Mayor.
Good evening. I'll let Mr. Belize, you know, share his thoughts, but I'm really proud to be here tonight to put this before you. I don't know Abraham. We have been working diligently to fill boards and commissions. We've been doing it on social media. We put it on newsletters, Council on Aging newsletter, our weekly newsletter, the monthly newsletter that we send out. And he reached out to my office, to Celia Canavan. And much like the whole process since I've been mayor, we ask for a resume and a letter of interest, and then I do a Zoom interview. This gentleman blew me away. He is articulate, he is just engaging, and he really cares about the community that we live in, the City of Champions. And so I am proud to put him before you tonight, and I hope you respectfully confirm his appointment. Thank you.
Do you have a statement that would you like to make, or he said you were articulate?
No, wait till you see.
Yeah, so really quick, right, just to really introduce myself. I want to thank the mayor for having me, as well as the finance committee for welcoming me. Side note, please bear with me. I'm not really good when it comes to public speaking. So, but yeah, just really quick. My name is Abraham Belize. I graduated over at Bridgewater State University last year with a Bachelor's of Science in Finance as well as Economics. So my goal really was really to start getting involved in the community, and I had this goal for the year of 2024. Back when I was in high school, I did participate in, a few community work with the Old Colony Y, but after that, I really never got involved with the community. So really, again, pertaining to the goal of the year, I wanted to get involved in the community. So I really, like Mayor said, I came into the office, really just asked, are there any positions that would allow me to have provide that value to the city? And he ended up, guiding me and leading me to this position. So,
Councilor Castro.
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Belize. Thank you so much for being here. We did not receive a copy of your letter of interest or your resume, so I'd just like it if you tell us a little about you. Did you go to Brockton High School, and why? Do you have a particular interest in the License Commission? It's a very important commission to the city.
Yeah, so I did go to Brockton High. I graduated in 2018. So really, the licensing committee, right? So I didn't, like I said, when I walked into the mayor's office, I didn't know what to expect. So I just really wanted to get involved in the community. So they asked me, what is my background? So I ended up telling them, and then they sent me a list of, available committees. Yes. So I ended up choosing the license committee just to see, I read about it and I seen what it was about, issuing licenses and things of that nature. Really, it's given me the opportunity to provide value to the committee, as well as it's going to be helpful to me in my career as well. So.
What is your career, sir?
Yeah, so originally, when I graduated in 2023, I was an accountant over at Newen and Barcam Management, which was a real estate management company. And I transferred over to New York Life as a financial advisor. So I'm an advisor right now.
Good for you.
Thank you.
Council, I want to apologize. That would have been from my office not sending that. I truly apologize. Before the final vote, you will all have that. I will make sure that gets sent to you all tomorrow.
That would be good.
Thank you. I
Reach out
apologize.
to your office. I didn't hear anything yet.
Yet's the key word.
Yet.
Thank you.
Yet. Well, have you watched a License Commission meeting?
No.
Okay.
It's the first
Well,
time.
they're meeting this Thursday night on Zoom.
Yes, I'm
Okay.
aware of that.
So if I get your email address, I'll send you the link
Okay, sounds
so you
good.
can watch it.
Sounds good.
Okay? Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Durancourt?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Belize, I'm really excited, that's the best way to put it, to actually see, someone, I'm not assuming your age, but I'll just, for the sake of this conversation, to actually step up to serve on something like this. The License Commission is not a joke, and I think it's important to have people with, different viewpoint, and sometimes it's okay not to have the knowledge to actually sit on there and vote based on, what you think is necessary according to the information that you will be, providing. Because at the end of the day, when you take a look at Brockton, the city is very diverse. Right. And I am, one of those people who believe in diversity. And I think that, this is an excellent call by the mayor. And I don't say this lightly. And, I really hope that you will take some time to do your own research and find out some of the ins and outs of that responsibility and act accordingly. Because at the end of the day, by virtue of having that power, you can make and break somebody's goals and somebody's vision and somebody's objective. And by virtue of that, it's important to actually know why you are there. And once, hopefully, this appointment is voted in favor, you will have the authority to determine what you can do and what you cannot do. And I hope that you will do your due diligence to determine what is important and what is not important, and not having anyone forcing you to make a decision by virtue of how they want it to be. And as an elected official, sometimes, well, not sometimes, all the time, we listen to our people. And one thing that our people know is that when we make a decision, we make it based on what they voted on. And as I'm looking at you, I can, go in with respect when the late Mayor Bill Carpenter, appointed me to serve on the Board of Trustees for the Brockton Public Library. And with that being said, it opened the door for me, give me access to information that I did not have to. And I hope you will not take this lightly. And obviously, I hope some of my colleagues will support this appointment, and hopefully, you will continue invest and stay in our city. Whenever I see that a young person is willing to live here, is willing to get involved, is willing to be part of this, it is hopeful. Because a lot of us, sometimes we are trying our best, but we don't have that opportunity. And I would say this in front of you, Mayor, I think this is one of your best choice so far since I've been on this council, because, from knowing you and accepting to give this kid, this young man, I should say, this opportunity without, having any knowledge, and you said it, you haven't watched any of these meetings, and they can be very interesting. I commend you for taking that chance and give him this opportunity, because I think it is a positive thing to do. You don't need to know what's going on, but you need to have the willingness, the desire, and the heart to do this job. And with that being said, I am here, man. Anything you need, let me know. I'll be more than happy to help you. With that being said, I motion to recommend it favorably.
Second.
A motion has been, and he's younger than you,
Thank you. Thank you for acknowledging that, Mr. Chairman.
Motion has been properly made and second to recommend this item favorably. All those in favor? Anyone opposed? It carries. Congratulations and thank you.
All right, thank you.
Number 3, sir.
Item 3, we have the appointment of Mrs. Marge Shepherd of Brockton, Mass. to the Brockton Council on Aging as an alternate for a 3-year term ending in November 2027. Invited, Ms. Marge Shepherd.
Councilors, I don't see Mrs. Shepard here. Many of you know her and her husband Warren. They live up in Ward 1, right near the Hancock Park, but they go to the COA, the Mary Cruz Kennedy Council on Aging, on a regular basis, and she asked me if we could consider putting her on the board. She's extremely excited about the 5,000 square foot addition. I don't know why she's not here tonight, but I do wholeheartedly support her desire to serve in a formal capacity with the COA, and I hope that you'll support this endeavor. Thank you.
Motion to recommend favorably.
Second.
A motion has been properly made and second to recommend this item favorably to the entire city council. All those in favor? Anyone opposed? It carries.
Mr.
No-
Chairman,
Councilor Castro.
thank you. I'd like to make a motion to take number 22 out of order. Hear it now.
Second.
A motion has been properly made to take 22 out of order and move it to the number 4 position. All those in favor? Anyone opposed? 22.
Thank you.
Item 22, resolve to invite Brockton Fire Chief Brian Nardelli and anyone he may wish to be accompanied by to appear at a Finance Committee meeting to discuss the whole blood truck put on the road earlier this year with grant funding by the town of Canton, how it is being used, how it has benefited the city of Brockton, and other important related information. Invited Fire Chief Brian Nardelli.
Chief, whole blood truck.
That's right.
Mike's yours.
Good evening, Mr. Chair. Good evening, councilors, and thank you for having us tonight. I come before you tonight with some good friends and some good friends to Brockton that Brockton doesn't even really know them yet. But Dr. Michael Volkanis, who I've been friends with since we were young and we worked together as young paramedics. He looks young. I wish I had that same vigor that he has. And Dr. Torres from Boston Medical Center, who has been vital in this entire endeavor. What I'd like to explain to you is Dr. Volkanis came to me a couple of years ago and talked about the importance of whole blood in the field, which I think as EMS providers, we've always known the importance of that. The endeavor that he took on to start up a regional style blood truck to deliver whole blood to trauma patients who needed it. As a background, over the years in EMS, we've always given what we call crystalloids or normal saline lactated ringers. You hear a lot of that. But one of the things that has developed and the importance of understanding why whole blood is so important, because it can carry the nutrients and carry the oxygen that so many vital trauma patients need. To this point, this truck went into service last spring, and it runs out of Canton with Canton firefighters, and they intercept with fire departments in that greater Norwood, Canton, Walpole, Mansfield area. Because of my good friend with my good friendship with Dr. Volkanis, I said, well, I want to be part of this. I think we could really utilize this truck well. So Brockton is somewhat of an outlier with this, but because of the way the highway system works, it has put us in an incredible position to be able to intercept, get trauma patients whole blood before they're transported to facilities like Boston Medical Center to see Dr. Torres for their definitive care. I don't want to get too deep into every incident we've had, but one I think that is very easy to point out that we see how valid and what a useful piece of equipment this is. Back in August of this year, the whole blood truck was called to the city of Brockton, down the Campello section, for a gentleman who had fallen down his stairs. When he fell down the stairs, he, obviously suffered some trauma, but the biggest trauma that he suffered was a severed brachial artery and vein. This man lost an inordinate amount of blood prior to us getting there. We applied tourniquets, were able to stop the bleeding. The whole blood truck was called for and quite honestly saved this man's life. Proper point of entry, getting it to the appropriate facility was very important. But without the 2 units of whole blood that this gentleman received, he probably wouldn't have survived. Even bigger than that, though, and I think it's important for everyone to understand, is this is a 37-year-old man who has a family to feed and a roof to have over his head. This gentleman, although through a long-term care, will be able to go back and work and do a job as well because of this. So I will leave it at that. If any of you have any questions, Dr. Volkanis and Dr. Torres are more than happy to answer any of the technical questions that go along with this. There's a whole background of the setup of how we get the truck here and who we go through and things of that nature that I could probably bore you with for an hour here, but I know you have quite an agenda, Mr. Clerk. But to that point, I think Dr. Volkanis and Dr. Torres can talk in depth if you have any questions about how this works and the importance of this truck and what it really means to Brockton, and how I thank Councilor Nicastro for inviting us here tonight to talk about this, because I think this is something that Brockton could stand up on its own in the future.
Councilwoman Castro.
Thank you. Gentlemen, thank you so much for being here. I am interested to know, give us, I guess, the Evelyn Wood version of what the truck does. How long does it take the truck to come? It's headquartered in Canton, I understand. I'm interested to know, how long does the whole blood last? And how much does traffic impact, how much does traffic impact getting people who are injured on this side of town into Boston, and how does this truck help those people stay alive?
Well, Dr. Torres can talk about some of the research behind it and how this came about a little bit, but the background is about 4 or 5 years ago, I was talking with somebody about trauma patients. What paramedics do in the field, they don't just transport patients to the hospital. They have to make critical decisions about point of entry and basically how to treat a patient on the way to the hospital, resuscitate. So you're delivering a patient who's alive and has a chance to get to the hospital. Medical patients, we've been doing this for years. We use what we call advanced cardiac life support to save cardiac arrest patients, patients having a heart attack, strokes, that sort of stuff. But for years, since the inception of paramedics, there's really nothing we can do for trauma patients. They can bleed out and die, and paramedics can watch that on the way to the hospital. San Antonio, Texas took military data about, 7 or 8 years ago now, took that data and initiated the first whole blood program in the country. As technology advanced, we were able to put together logistics to put whole blood out into the field. Our collaboration with Boston Medical Center and their blood bank and their licensure allows us to have a satellite blood bank in Canton. I picked Canton because of its location. It's located at the pinnacle of 128, 95, 24. Any patient that's coming from southeast Massachusetts flows through Canton on the way to a trauma center. We can pick up any patients being transported in an ambulance in that area. Whole blood is not something we can put on every ambulance because it's a limited resource. It's donated, and we use what's called O-positive blood. That blood is something that is basically a universal donor, and we can give that to patients without type and screening them. So we carry 2 units of blood. It's all logistically, through Wi-Fi and technology. It's monitored at Boston Medical Center through their blood bank. The paramedics at Canton Fire have been trained how to monitor it there and how to take care of it, and they take care of it like it's their own child. Every day they check on it. They make sure it's within the correct temperature range, and then if called upon, they're able to take the blood. They go into what's called a Class 5 ambulance, which isn't a standard ambulance. It's non-transporting. They have a full gear that you would see on an ALS, Advanced Life Support Ambulance, and they intercept with any department that needs it. The town of Canton has been good enough to kind of sponsor us and take on some of the financial responsibility and also allow us to work with the paramedics. We've done training at Boston Medical Center. The blood, we can hold on to the blood for 28 days. If it's not used, it goes back to Boston Medical Center, where they then break it up into its components. Whole blood consists of everything that's in our normal blood. They can break it up into its platelets, plasma, red blood cells, and it can be used for patients at Boston Medical Center. So there's absolutely no waste. When we first presented this to the state, through looking at the records in the area, I was predicting we might use it 8 times a year. To me, some people might say, well, you're spending all this time and effort to use something that's only going to be used 8 times a year. Like the chief said, this is being used to save the lives of young people. The leading cause of death from trauma patients is hemorrhage, and the age is 2 to 47. Those are the people that have their whole life ahead of them. They have kids, they have families. We can bring them back to their families by doing this. So we keep it, we've used it 15, I think we've gone out 32 times since March. We've used it 15 times. We look at every single run. I look at the run in real time. As soon as they're dispatched, Norfolk County Communications calls me on my cell phone, lets me know they're going out. After the paramedics are done with the run, I call them on the phone. I talk with them. We do a little debrief to see if it was, see how the medical decision making was and if they did the right thing. And we found that they can make the decision, properly make the decision, and administer the blood properly. Brian talked about the case in in Brockton. We recently had a shooting victim in Canton that the trauma team at Boston Medical Center said he would absolutely went into cardiac arrest and probably died en route to the hospital. He's alive now, so he has a second chance of life. Yeah.
So how many communities does this whole blood truck serve?
So we're serving about 20 communities right now.
20.
So I'm working in conjunction with Dr. Muse, who works at Brockton Hospital, with communities on the South Shore, such as the Bridgewaters, down around that area, and we serve the towns around the Norwood area.
And how does traffic impact?
Well, traffic can impact it. Initially, when we first stood up the program, there was a couple of patients that we had trouble intercepting with, but what we did is we came up with, we call them intercept points. So instead of being dispatched to the address that the ambulance is at, we dispatch the transfusion unit to the intercept point. They go there, and if there's time, then they can track towards the ambulance. But just like any emergency response, traffic can impact it.
And how hard is it to get a whole blood truck?
You mean stand it up?
To set it up and equip it, funding?
It took me 4 years to set this up.
4 years, wow.
So we know how to do it, but there's certain obstacles. So this is the first time that blood is stored outside of a hospital blood bank for this purpose in Massachusetts. So that took a while we had to get approval from OEMS, and we had to get approval from the Massachusetts Department of Public Health. And it was kind of a chicken and an egg thing. OEMS said they wouldn't really look at it until state licensure looked at it, and state licensure wouldn't look at it until OEMS looked at it. So I had to kind of finagle that a little bit, but it all worked out. We got a lot of support from the state.
So now that you've done it once, you could probably do it in half the amount of time, right?
Yeah. Be happy to.
Right?
I think so.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, I wondered why this was so fascinating to me. My son is a universal donor. The Red Cross has him on speed dial. And my father was also a universal donor. So how does Boston Medical Center feel about this?
Yeah, I mean, this is great. I mean, I'm on the receiving end, right, as a trauma surgeon. Just a little bit of background. So I'm a trauma and acute care surgeon at BMC. We're the busiest level 1 trauma center in all of New England. So we get a lot of trauma. I've been there for about 2 years now. Before I was at Johns Hopkins where I was doing my trauma down there, also doing my research. I've been doing research in whole blood since 2016. And so not only am I a surgeon, but also do research in this space. And I would say in Baltimore, I was trying to get something started similar to what they're doing here as well until I was recruited by BMC to come up here. And was fortunate enough to find someone who was equally invested in it's really a game-changing program for our trauma patients. As Dr. Valkanis mentioned, traumatic bleeding is the leading cause of preventable deaths from injury in the U.S. It is the #1 cause of death and disability among our young children, actually ages 1 through 49 years of age. And so there hasn't been much advancements in trauma care to mitigate or to lessen this number, but now we have something that has evidence-based proof that this does save lives. The evidence was first out of the in-hospital, meaning patients, if they were fortunate enough to make it to the hospital with severe bleeding, we saw in the hospital that we give whole blood, and those patients actually did better. And one of the research publications that I looked at, looking at a nationwide cohort, is that it actually reduced the risk of death by 37% if you got whole blood in the hospital. And we also saw in a subsequent research that I did as well, that if you got it ideally within 14 minutes, that was the best benefit in terms of survival. So it made sense, if we're doing it early in the hospital, we should be bringing this closer to injury. Because actually, when you have severe bleeding and severe trauma, your body, it's a systemic attack. Your body really shuts down. Your body doesn't want to form the components it needs to stop the bleeding. As a surgeon, I can easily stop the bleeding. I can put my finger on something, I can clamp things off. It's the microscopic bleeding that we cannot control. You can get hit in the head and bleed from the shin. That's how bad this, what we call coagulopathy or derangement of bleeding happens. And so with whole blood, it actually blunts that derangement. And so that's why we think these patients benefit. And so just going back to your question, we have overwhelming support at BMC. The leadership actually took, they recognized this, and they actually got called to the leadership committee because they commended our efforts and our partnership because they know that this is going to change lives. And again, not many centers across the U.S. do this. Actually, fewer than 1% of EMS agencies are doing this. And that is expanding. The evidence is out there, but you just have to, get out of your, it's something new. And you just have to push the envelope, but we're pushing the envelope safely because we actually have grade 1 good evidence that this works.
How many other whole blood trucks are operating in Massachusetts?
None.
We're the only one.
This is it?
Yeah.
This is a pioneering initiative, and so we're setting the standard, the template, so other programs can kind of mimic what we're doing, but we're setting that stage.
We're the first and the only one in the Northeast United States.
Wow. Well, I'm very pleased that Brockton and the other outlying communities have the opportunities to benefit from this. And I just think it's something to explore, to bring it even closer to Brockton, within Brockton perhaps. You're doing wonderful work. How wonderful that you persevered to get this done. And I appreciate you coming in tonight to spread the word. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good evening, doctors. Thank you for being here this evening, and to you as well, Chief. Just a few operational questions. So the truck is operated by Town of Canton firefighter EMS?
Correct.
And then so who makes the call to bring them to the scene?
So we did outreach to all these departments when we start as part of the program. What we found actually is, and the chief can talk a little bit about this, we did outreach obviously to the paramedics that work in the systems around here, but we found actually working with the incident commanders, the command staff on scene, they're the ones that actually have the bird's eye view of the incident, and they're the ones that are calling. The first time we used this was Braintree, the Deputy Chief Starkey there, was at a car accident at 3 in the morning. And it was a prolonged extrication, and the patient's blood pressure was dropping. He had massive internal injuries, and he had heard about the program, and he went up to the paramedic and he said, "Hey, Canton Fire has the transfusion unit. Do you want us to call?" And the paramedics right away said yes. They were so engaged in patient care that they didn't have the forethought to call, and that's something we see. That's crew resource management on scene, and they called, and it was the first time it was used. And Dr. Torres can talk about that a little bit, but we were able to give the blood to the patient. He survived.
So there's currently some cross-training going on with Brockton EMS and the Town of Canton and their blood truck, and
Correct.
Just making sure we know that asset's available in certain situations.
Correct. So we did speak with paramedics from Brockton. Chief Nardelli has spoken with his command staff, and we put up flyers at Good Samaritan Hospital so that they can be reminded. For some of the local departments, we put little reminders on the dashboard of the ambulance so that they just key them in, because it's something new. When you teach, when the stress is on, you tend to go back to what you originally learned, and this isn't something that they originally learned. So part of the outreach is getting the word out.
And then just lastly, so on the scene, does the EMS, like who now has control? If you're providing that blood, is it still the Brockton-based EMS person that's kind of still calling the shots, or does your blood truck now come in and they take over, or just operationally, how does that work out?
So, Council, it's interesting, and to Dr. Volkanis's point, it's very interesting. The gentleman I spoke of earlier, when he was on the ground, the paramedics were working on him, and the company officer from Engine Company 2 leaned down. He says, "Hey, should we call that blood truck thing?" And that's how that came about. And because remember, like Dr. Volkanis and Dr. Torres says, they are so focused in. When the blood truck shows up, the patient care is still going on by the paramedics that initiated the care. They're really just now hooking in the transfusion of the blood, and they stay with them to watch for any potential side effects or anything along the way. But and they can even help as they're going along. It's funny and in the logistics of it, and that's really what I've been trying to work a lot with the chiefs on the South Shore, is originally, we're going to meet on the highway. And that's all well and good until it's 3 a.m. and you have to meet on the highway and no one knows anybody, right? So we early on realized, you know what we're going to do, because we missed one time. We couldn't find them. And And what ended up happening is we've now come up with pre-designated areas, kind of like with Boston Medflight, they have pre-designated landing zones.
Right.
We have pre-designated areas where they get together, and what will happen is our engine company will follow them to block traffic when they get there so they can set up and everything's squared away, and then they return. So I might have an engine company that's all the way up Route 24 into Randolph, just protecting the truck while they get this taken care of. Then they come right back to Brockton. So there are always logistical issues. I think, like anything, there'll be a learning curve on this, but it's worked out very well thus far. And I think, it's each incident, it's come to Brockton 4 times. Each one of those incidents, it's like amongst the command staff in my department, it doesn't matter if it's 3 in the morning or 3 in the afternoon, the texts are flying everywhere. Just because we want to make sure it works out well, because we realize what a life-saving endeavor this is and how important it is. And like to Councilor Nicastro's point, at some point I would really love to work to get it here along with Dr. Muse, Dr. Torres, and Dr. Volkanis and have it right in the city. Again, there's obviously hurdles. This is one project. He had to go for a special projects waiver through the Department of Public Health to get this done, but I think we could pull it off here. It just might take a little bit.
Can I add something very important? So Brockton, looking at the map, right, there's different designation of trauma centers, right? You have level 1, level 2, and level 3. Level 1 trauma center is the most equipped 24/7, resources, 24/7 trauma surgeons in-house, ready to go. You have your ancillary services, neurosurgeons, orthopedics, et cetera, because we take care of the sickest patients, right? Then you have level 2 and level 3. They don't have 24/7 surgeons in-house. They don't have ancillary services in-house. Level 3, the lowest, and I believe, what is it, Good Sam? Good Sam is a level 3 trauma center, meaning you don't have a trauma center in-house. You'd be lucky enough in the middle of the night to have a trauma surgeon come in. And so this is a trauma desert, right? And so we know that this is one way to mitigate the inequity that we have in trauma care access and quality of care here in this area. Is providing, again, a proven intervention to save lives, to buy time to actually get to a level 1 trauma center and get definitive care. Because I kid you not, there are patients that are being injured going to a level 3, and again, it's based on resource. They're not going to make it out of level 3 with critical injuries. We know that for sure. So this is one way to, again, to close that gap that we have in trauma access care here, to give them a intervention that shows the buy time to make it to the hospital to get definitive care. Because I can tell you, the patients that have come to us at BMC most certainly needed that blood. Those patients, without a doubt, would have died at the scene or en route if they didn't get that time-sensitive intervention. I kid you not. It's a miracle of what we're doing here.
Just to segue on what Dr. Torres is saying. So at the beginning, when I was talking about this to people, to the lay public, what I think of this is all we're doing is we're providing a bridge. We're providing a bridge from the scene, point of injury, to the trauma center, and the blood fills that gap. It feels like it keeps the cells in the body bathed with blood, oxygen, and nutrients until they can get to Dr. Torres. We're doing rapid resuscitation in the field, mitigating damage. And I think, to answer your question from before, I think what you're getting at is when a ALS ambulance or a BLS ambulance calls for the blood truck arrives, it's shared responsibility at that point. It's that they work together as a team. The ALS crew who's initially has the patient has the responsibility, but they've recognized that they need whole blood. The paramedic who does the transfusion knows when to give it, knows the risks, knows what to look for, knows if there's a reaction, knows when to stop it, when to continue, whether to give additional units. So they work together, much like right now in the Blue Hills, there's a fire, right? They call, Milton may not have enough tanker trucks. They call mutual aid and another tanker truck comes in and they work together seamlessly. And that's what we've tried to do here because, like I said, blood is limited. We can't put it on every ambulance. So we have to figure out some way of having a shared resource in communities that don't function at a county level, I guess.
Well, I appreciate that, and what an amazing program. It's literally life-saving, so we appreciate that. Thank you for bringing this asset to the city of Brockton, and gentlemen, we appreciate it. Good evening.
Chief, did you want to say something? I thought you were...
Oh, no, I was just sitting there. But I want to thank you for having us. I think I'll leave you with this. One of the important things, we see so much that's gone on in the last number of years with healthcare, whether it be the Stewart situation, whether it be the fire at Brockton Hospital, the flood at Norwood Hospital. I think it's nice to see innovation and people working collaboratively together through multitudes of different scenarios to get this to work, so that the residents of the city of Brockton know that I really want them to know that we're doing everything we can to make sure we take care of them at their worst time and their biggest crisis.
Motion to recommend favorably?
Second.
Motion has been properly made in second to recommend this item favorably to the entire city council. All those in favor? Anyone opposed? It carries. And please thank our neighbors to the north, the town of Canton, for their support on this particular item.
I will.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Number 4, Mr. Clerk.
Item 4, ordered in accordance with the general laws of Massachusetts, Chapter 44, recommending that the City Council approve the tax increment exemption agreement, TIE, between the City of Brockton and Bryan Hotel LLC for the property located at 31 West Elm Street. Invited Chief Financial Officer Troy Clarkson, Chairman of the Assessors John O'Donnell, Mr. Scott Butcher, Mr. Stephen Young.
Mr. Mayor, welcome again.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I will just share my 2 cents. I support this wholeheartedly. The old Bryan Hotel when we were kids, then the Elm Court was purchased by Mr. Steve Young. I had the opportunity to meet Mr. Steve Young probably a year plus in my office. He was spending millions and millions of dollars on this building. We marched by it the other day. I was talking to Councilor Castro. We have a wonderful modern building right next door, Mr. Anatol's, 47 West Elm Street, and now we have a piece of history that's being renovated. So I do wholeheartedly support this. I think it's the right thing to do. We are business friendly, and we need to attract a wonderful addition to downtown. So I do want to thank Mr. Young and his team. Thank you.
Mr. Young?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening, Mr. Chairman and committee members. A brief introduction. My name is Stephen Young. As the mayor just mentioned, I purchased the Elm Court Hotel around 3 years ago, 3+ years ago, and as a background of myself, I'm a licensed architect, a licensed builder, and I've spent the vast majority of my professional career in these turn-of-the-century masonry buildings. So I'm very familiar with this asset type, and I have a passion for old buildings and try to make a living restoring them and bringing them back to their former grandeur. So in a nutshell, that's myself and my history. Currently, the Elm Court is a existing market-rate apartment building where guests can stay as little as for one night. It's currently 64 units. The Elm Court has been in existence since 1998 when it changed from its former identity, as the mayor mentioned, Hotel Bryant. That building, that same building, and its old identity originates from 1903. I currently have 11 employees, including a 24-hour front desk person. The rooms include linen service, heat, electricity, linen, cable TV, etc. It's a 4-story masonry structure. Each floor is approximately 8,500 square feet, totaling 35,000 square feet. There's 21 surface parking spots and solar on the roof. As I mentioned, my company purchased it in '22. My plan is to pursue a historic rehab of the asset using federal and state historic tax credits to help finance the project. The plans under this historic guidelines will allow me to redevelop the property into 48 market-rate apartments. The historic conversion entitles us to utilize the Mass Housing Development Incentive Program, HDIP, which will then allow us to pursue a tax increment exemption, a tie agreement with the city, ultimately receiving additional state credits from the EOHLC, Executive Office for Housing and Livable Communities. Without those funds, to be direct, Mr. Chairman, without those funds, this project is not viable financially. My financial partner, Scott Butcher, is here with me tonight, as the mayor introduced, and any financial questions he's here to assist me with. I've had the pleasure of speaking with Councilors Nicastro, Councilors Thompson, and Councilors Farwell today, and regarding the project, and really feel this tie agreement, which the terms Mr. Butcher can speak more of, they're commensurate with former deals that have been made with the city and approved by this committee, and would, as I mentioned, would really help me to bring the Elm Court back to its former grandeur and hopefully improve this slice of downtown, which a lot of people would like to see this building renovated. So thank you for your time, Mr. Chairman, and any questions myself or Mr. Butcher are here to answer. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Butcher?
Sure. Happy to answer any questions you may have, but as Mr. Young just pointed out, he has a passion for rehabilitating historic assets. This building, when we first ventured out to rehab the property, we thought it was going to be part of a historic district, and it's not. So we pursued an individual National Historic Register listing of the property, which it is eligible for, and the National Park Service has approved that. So I think that's a great testament to the historic nature of the asset itself. The historic tax credits are one component of a complicated financing, but the Housing Development Incentive Program tax credits is another component of that financing. And in order for us to obtain the Housing Development Incentive Program tax credits, we first must have to enter into a tax increment exemption agreement with the City of Brockton. And we can't even apply to the state to participate in the HDIP program unless the city has approved a tie agreement. And that's what we're trying to accomplish here tonight.
Very well. Councillor Farwell and then Castro.
Just very quickly, gentlemen, and actually this is a question for the mayor. Once this gets approved Monday night, favorable tonight, Monday night, I noticed there is a slight modification to the HDIP boundary, which you'd execute the required documents so that we can accomplish that.
Yes, Councilor, my capacity as CEO, I have the authority to execute the contract, and that's what I would do if the committee approves this endeavor.
And that's the only impediment right now, is just the modification to the change in boundary. Other than that, where everything is.
This one's, Mr. Young's already in a district, or is expanding the district for another two projects? If I may.
Thank you.
Go ahead. If there's no objections.
Mr. President.
Mr. May, go ahead.
Yes, the Elm Court Bryant Hotel is already within a Housing Development Incentive Program district downtown. The other item that's on the agenda tonight is extending the boundaries north to include two more projects that will redevelop on the north side of Court Street.
Okay, and my last question, and it probably will be the proverbial sticker shock, but what is market rate now in Brockton, do you think, for what you have planned?
In terms of the rental income?
Yeah, in terms of what you anticipate.
So based on the market study that we did, and our lender's currently doing an appraisal, the one-bedroom market rate units, I'll tell you in 1 second. The one-bedroom units are $1,950, and the two-bedroom units are $2,350.
Well, gentlemen, as they say, that's no small change. That's. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor. I think I just had a heart attack, but Councillor Castro.
Thank you. Good evening, gentlemen, and Mr. Young, I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you today.
Thank you.
My profession, I'm trained as a real estate attorney, and one of my biggest sadnesses about the downtown area, I don't represent the downtown area, I represent the unfashionable South Side. But one of my biggest disappointments about the downtown area is that so many of the beautiful buildings that we see on the aged postcards, like what you sent to us, have been taken down. They were left to fall apart, or maybe they had a fire and they were taken down. And so I'm delighted that you would make the effort to maintain and bring this building back to its glory. And I think it's really impressive that it's going to go on the National Register. You proved its significance and actually Brockton's significance. And of course, I know why it's going on the National Register, because in 1947, Eddie and Betty Tuig, my in-laws, had their wedding reception there where everyone enjoyed chicken in the basket. So I know that was a factor in it. Of course it was. Mr. Young, I will tell you, I was very impressed by your website. I spent a bit of time looking at it today and looking at your various projects.
Thank you.
You're doing good work.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilor.
And I'm delighted that you are interested in taking on this building in the downtown of Brockton. It's a 10-year TIF, and that will be it. Right after that, you'll be in good shape.
Correct.
And it will be 48 units. Now, your application says studios 1s and 2s. When we spoke today, you said 1s and 2s. Will there be studio apartments?
No, what I said today is correct, just 1s and 2s.
And that's good. That's really good. And you will have adequate parking?
That is a to-be-determined question. I've recently...
Is everywhere in the downtown.
Yeah, it's a challenge.
Yes.
All development projects are hung up by parking. I've been speaking with Director May today and also John O'Donnell, and they've both been providing me resources where the city could help me to secure a required parking for the project. The zoning also in this part of downtown is changing or subject to change, to be determined, obviously, with future meetings and committees, but I feel I have a good handle on the parking.
Well, I would suspect that given the proximity to the train station, it would be considered transit-oriented
Sure.
housing, and therefore perhaps the parking requirements are sometimes relaxed.
Correct. Thank you.
I wish you all the best.
Thank you.
I will support this. Thank you so much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Thompson.
Yeah, please. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good evening, gentlemen. And again, Mr. Young, it was a pleasure speaking with you earlier. I know you stated that. I just wanted to kind of clear a breakdown of the 48 units. I believe on the phone you said there were 2 3-bedrooms. Is that no longer in the plan?
Correct. I confirmed the unit count today, and it is the unit count is 46 1-bedrooms and 3 2-bedrooms.
Wow. Okay. Is this still currently operating as a hotel right now, or?
So it's a slightly indirect answer. The short answer is and everyone knows it as the Elm Court Hotel. In my mind, it's an apartment building. We do have apartments with normal apartments, as one would think. There's also a number of guest rooms which enjoy a shared bath in the hallway and a shared kitchen as well. So there's a vast majority of those rooms. That's where you start getting the unit count up to where it is now in the 60s. Sorry, repeat your question.
Just that, is it operating as a hotel where?
It is. It is. So I'd like to say it is operating as a hotel 100%. My guests pay in advance, and some guests stay there for one night. Another guest has been there for 14 years. So it's everyone in between. I'd like to say it's for people with $400, $500, $600 in their pocket, as opposed to $4,000, $5,000, $6,000. People who cannot afford last month's security deposit but need a warm place to stay with clean sheets. That's the space that the Elm Court's been serving in for a number of years, and interestingly, the National Park Service's consideration and ultimate approval of this building as a historic property. I'm just have my blinders on as an architect. I'm an aesthetics guy. I'm a history buff. I love these old buildings. Interestingly, the National Park Service was very, for lack of a better word, moved by its history as a single-room hotel. And JFK stopped there on a campaign stop. Many people enjoyed the Coral Room, which hosted weddings. Many town functions, Masons, so on and so. This building's history is very important for the city of Brockton. I wouldn't call myself a historic purist per se, but as I mentioned, I spent my life, my professional career in these old historic buildings, and they're worth saving. There are dozens of these buildings around downtown Brockton, and I'm not looking for a pat on the back, but it's a beautiful building. It's a solid building. next time you walk by it, even if it's tomorrow, pre-renovation, please take an extra 5 or 10 seconds and look at the masonry work on the front of that building. It's absolutely beautiful. And the original drawings are at the State Archives are moving as well. And it's a special piece of property. And on the final note there, not to pitch this too hard tonight, these older buildings and restoring them, unfortunately, as you look at at a lot of downtown buildings being new, they're more expensive to redo than to tear down and to renovate. And I would ask the committee tonight to consider that regarding weighing this tie option. The financial piece is just as important as the drawings, the masonry, the windows. This has to be financially feasible, and I'm a realist. So thank you for that part.
Just point of information as well. I know this committee has been actively looking at the homeless issue. Last winter, we didn't have a lot of snow, thankfully, for our budget, but we had some bitter, bitter cold nights, really cold nights. And so John Yazinski, the CEO of Father Bill's Mainspring, had called me a couple different times last winter saying, what are we going to do? Because people could pass away on the streets tonight. I called Mr. Young. Again, he doesn't know me. I met him one time before, and he was able to house people to save their lives. So I think that speaks volumes about this gentleman as well. So thank you again, Mr. Young.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Well, I appreciate that, sir. When you do move on to renovations, I'm assuming you're going to have to close down the hotel while you renovate?
Correct. Yes.
And if everything goes according to plan, when exactly would that be, and how long would it take you to renovate?
Renovation, I would say 1 to 1.5 years, conservatively.
18 months is what we got.
18 months on the renovation term, and when do you foresee it?
We would like to close on a financing to start construction in the late spring of 2025, early summer.
Okay. Understood. Well, I mean, I understand the financial, how important a tie agreement is and the financial stacking to be able to get this project done.
Chronology of that,
right.
Correct. Very
so, you know, it's a great project. We appreciate your interest in Brockton and this building specifically. I look forward to a beautiful addition to Brockton's downtown. So thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you, Councilor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Reinecourt.
Thank you. Really quick, again, thank you for actually, taking the time to calm down and, of course, talk about this. And earlier you said something, some people stay there for one night, and as we speak, you have somebody who's been there for 14 years.
Correct.
Somebody who deeply care about people. Just for the sake of this, given the fact that, let's just say everything goes well and you're about to shut it down for renovations, like, what would you do with this tenant? Obviously, it's a hotel who's been there for 14 years. And given the fact that we are in Massachusetts, whereby, it might be different. Correct me if I'm wrong, because that's a hotel status, but with the time frame, that person has been there for 14 years. So to keep it simple, what would you do with that person? If the only place that person has is that for 14 years?
It's a great question. Thank you, Councilor. I addressed this with the tenant population year and a half, 2 years ago, and we set up a desk. We set up hours and a desk in the lobby where residents could go, and we would offer them resources. A majority of them we would send to Father Bill's if they needed a place to stay. Mm-hmm. We would recommend that was one of the locations. But importantly, there's a very practical side of this, which is the safety of that gentleman, for example, is very important to me.
Yeah.
But it's also important. So I'm wearing two hats here. It's also important to me to make sure he's safe when I'm renovating. So the consideration was, hey, do we keep him half of the place open, this and that? So what I did at the time, which was a strain financially, was we had all guests come forward who would agree ahead of time to switch their status to a tenant at will situation, and for them to not waive their rights as a person, as a resident in the Commonwealth, but to volunteer. Hey, we understand this building's about to undergo significant renovation, $10 million renovation and plus, and we would like the opportunity to so those people either those people either relocated at that point, and again, this is approximately a year and a half ago, or they were offered a cash for keys scenario, and it was completely voluntary. A lot of these people are struggling financially, so a lot of them accepted that cash for keys. So the people that needed a place to stay and did not understand that, hey, this is going to be a really dangerous, really large construction site. You can't stay here. We can't have people. They were given an opportunity and resources to relocate, and they did. And the people that are remaining understand that the renovation, the substantial renovation, is pending, and they have on their own accord staying in the hotel. So
yeah, so it's like I'm asking you this question because I mean, obviously, the mayor stated something. You know, if somebody chooses to stay there for 14 years, it means, number one, they like the place, and number two, maybe that's the only place they can afford. And based on what the other gentleman said, like a one-bedroom apartment would be like $1,950, and for a two-bedroom, it's like $2,500.
Right.
And with that being said, I mean, this person may not be able to pay $1,950.
Sure.
And would there be? Well, I'm not advocating in terms of how you're going to run your business, but I think it's important to take consideration, given the fact that how we're going to vote on this. And for somebody, I don't represent one area. I represent the entire city. Some people have section, but I have all of it. So for me, the reason why I'm putting a lot of emphasis into this is the fact that, yeah, this person has been there for so long. Maybe that person can afford certain things. Would that person, I don't know who that person is, but would that person have priority in terms of like, okay, so once this building is done, you can come back and live there. So what would be your consideration for someone like this person who may not be able to pay you $1,950? I understand it's a business. I understand you have to do what you're supposed to do, but given the fact that he or she has been there for 14 years, I will take this in consideration, and depending on your answer, that will determine how I vote on this, because I think it's key, I think it's important, and obviously we are dealing with a homeless situation. I am 100% in favor of what you are doing. I admire it, I appreciate it, but at the same time, I think it is important to think about someone like this person. You said it, some people are there for one day, some people are there for 14 years. So I wouldn't feel comfortable sitting up here voting on something like this without taking the deep consideration for someone like that. And then again, my vote will be based on, what you say. I mean, obviously, you already said a lot of things that I like, and how you view it. I just want to say this, publicly. Go ahead.
thank you, Councilor. Director May, did you want to say something?
If I may, Councilor, sorry. Just recently, the mayor has brought the HUD funding, the CDBG, and the Home Investment Partnership funding back into the city. Mm-hmm. That allows us to be more strategic on investments in affordable housing. Mm-hmm. We have several projects underway now, but now that we have control of these funds, we're going to see more a greater variety of affordable housing throughout the city. Mm-hmm. And so working with developers like Mr. Young, who is taking advantage of this historic structure and being able to bring it back onto a market rate situation, we are working then to create affordable housing that is of high quality, that will support the citizens and residents of Brockton.
I appreciate your view, which I welcome, but I'll tell you this. Back then, when I first joined this council in 2018, there was a fight. I remember there was two young ladies come from the western part of Massachusetts talking about market rate and affordable housing, and that can be very tricky. And with that being said, we can, I promise you I'm not going to take more time, but I'm going to say this. The difference between market rate and affordable housing is very large. And people play with this sometimes so they can get what they want. And at the end of the day, $1,950, that's not cheap. Not anybody can afford that. And obviously, it's a business that you have to run. But my concern is that obviously, what May can attest to this. We have a lot of young professionals in the city, who want to stay here, want to live here, but they cannot afford it. So I'm in favor of what you are doing, but what I would not be part of is voting on something that would not be beneficial to everyone. And with that
Understand.
being said, I may be able to afford it. I'm not saying I can, but just an example. But what about somebody else? And I cannot be selfish in this regard. And I think that it's important for us to talk about it publicly because it's going to be taxpayer money, man.
It is. Let me offer some context on the people staying per room per night. Tonight, affordable housing was mentioned, not by myself. So this building has been run as and is currently being run as, and prior to my purchase, what I would call a market rate building. They're for people who don't have money saved, but to be very clear, this is for people who have money in their pocket. It's not an affordable, it's not, there's no, it's a market rate. So to give context, the most inexpensive room where you could stay tonight is, which does not have a bathroom and does not have a kitchen. They're common out in the hallway. It's just a room. It does have a sink, clean linens, heat, and electricity. That's $70 per night. Okay? Doing the math at 30 days, that's at $2,100 a month. Now, that being said, we do give discounts for a 1-week stay and a 1-month stay, for example. But that proverbial guest who's been there for the 14 years has been paying this market rate. So I don't want to, this is not a shelter, this is not a Father Bill's, this is a market rate operation. It has been and it will be. This is, and it will continue to be, it's just people that can't afford last month's security deposit and a 12-month lease. It's for people prior, and with this very expensive pending renovation, which I've noted before, it's going to take these taxpayer-funded incentives, right, like the tie agreement, to get this building renovated. So I take putting clean and safe roofs over people's heads very safety. I am not with all due respect to our homeless population, this is a market rate project. It's been that way for a couple decades and will continue to be post renovation. And that's with all due respect to our homeless population. I just didn't want you to think that because we're renting rooms by one night that this was a homeless shelter.
Oh, no, not at all. I mean, the reason I made the point was the fact that obviously, Director Rob May stated that, with the Hub Fund and stuff like that, we got affordable housing. And based on the document that I read, there was not even a part of it that talks about affordable. It's market rate. I understand that. The reason I mentioned that, a while back in 2018, there was 2 young ladies came here with a book trying to explain the difference.
Sure.
And it was kind of like interesting because some people didn't really see the difference. They assumed it was the same thing. It is not the same thing, and people can be very confused about it. So, to end this, I welcome what you are doing, man, and I wish you nothing but the best.
Thank you.
And with that being said, I will support this. The question wasn't on whether or not, I want to support it, but to acknowledge, the housing problem that not just Brockton, but we are facing nationwide, but that's the city of Brockton. This is the city of Champion. We can be an example in terms of like what we do, and I cannot wait to see what you're gonna do with this building, and I'm excited to see the outcome.
Thank you, Councilor, very much. I appreciate the questioning. Thank you.
Of course. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Motion?
Motion to recommend favorably.
Second.
A motion has been properly made in second to recommend this item favorably to the entire city council. All those in favor? Anyone opposed? It carries, and thank you
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you,
Chairman.
gentlemen.
Thank you,
for
Mr.
believing in
Chairman
our
and committee
city
members.
and investing in the city. Number 5. Mr.
Item 5, ordered that the City Council authorizes the acceptance and expenditure of the total grant funds in the amount of $15,000 from the Old Colony Planning Council to the Council on Aging. Invited Director of Council on Aging Janice Fitzgerald, Chief Financial Officer Troy Clarkson.
Madam Director, welcome.
Good evening, councilors. So this is a grant for $15,000 from Old Colony Planning Council that we're going to use to offset some of the cost for our older adults to participate in programs.
Motion to recommend favorably.
Second.
A motion has been properly made in second to recommend it. On the motion?
Yes, thank
Go
you.
ahead, ma'am.
Good evening. Hi, Ms. Fitzgerald. Nice to see you. So I read the paperwork, and this is for older adult exercise programs?
Yep, so we run exercise classes normally, $5 a person. So now we're able to bring the cost down significantly to help
That's great. Do you get a good turnout for them?
We do.
Good to know. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
A motion has been properly made in second to recommend the item favorably. All those in favor? Anyone opposed? It carries. And thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
Item 6, ordered that the city clerk be directed to amend order number 1 as voted by the council on June 24th, 2024, to amend the order so that the language specifically states that the $510,061,072 appropriation order for the FY25 revenue budget reflect that the appropriation includes a line item for $1 million spending from the stabilization count, $952,075 from certified free cash, $7,947,925 from Chapter 324 Reserve Fund, and $650,000 from ambulance receipts as reflected in the FY25 budget book. Be it further ordered that the city clerk be directed to amend order number 3 as voted by the council on June 24, 2024, to amend the order so that language specifically states that the $23,766,360 appropriation order for the FY25 revenue budget reflect that the appropriation for certified retained earnings includes the line item for $2,606,668 from the DPW water enterprise account. Be it further ordered that the city clerk be directed to amend order number 6 as voted by the council on June 24, 2024, to amend the order so that language specifically states that the $2,396,174 appropriation order for the FY25 revenue budget reflect that the appropriation for certified retained earnings included the line item for $510,967 from the Parks and Recreation Enterprise. Invited DPW Commissioner Patrick Hill, Superintendent of Parks Tim Carpenter, and Chief Financial Officer Troy Clarkson.
Dr. Clarkson.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman.
Sounds interesting. Sounds pretty formal. Dr. Clarkson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the council. As I noted to you in my typical memo provided to you with detail on tonight's agenda, this item is not asking for you to spend any additional money. It's not asking you to appropriate any additional funds for any department. As we've worked with the Department of Revenue to set the FY25 tax rate and to organize the city's finances, they looked at our budget book and the budget order that was filed with the council, and then looked at the official record of your vote. And what they're simply asking here is that you acknowledge that your action that you took in June on the budget is reflective of that budget order. So the official record of the meeting doesn't have this level of detail. So they're simply asking for a more formal record of what you voted so that it's clear what the intent of the council was when you passed the budget. I did attach to the email, and I believe also in your packet was contained the actual letter from the Department of Revenue requesting this action.
Council Fowler.
Dr. Clarkson, you and I spoke earlier today, and while this is clarifying language, it gives me an opportunity to ask you, having participated in numerous meetings with state officials, this seems to indicate that the DOR does pay attention to what goes on in municipalities, and if there were issues, and this just happens to be a language change, if there are issues, we would certainly know about it, wouldn't we?
Most certainly, yes, Councilor.
So is it fair to say that, particularly since the issues that arose in FY23, that they have been and continue to be closely monitoring what we do, including approving setting of the tax rate, which we're going to do next Monday? I think there is some feeling in the community that we're afloat with no accountability, and I think it's important to recognize the state watches what goes on. They don't want to come in and bail us out again as they did back in 1990.
Yes, and as I've stated many times over the last year or so, they are not only paying close attention, they are working very closely in collaboration, particularly with our auditing staff, and are being very helpful in providing guidance, and that was how this issue developed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
I'll move
Counsel.
favorable if no one else has anything.
Second.
A motion has been properly made in second to move the item favorably. All those in favor? Anyone, did you want to say something, or was just, okay. It carries. Thank you.
Item 7, ordered in accordance with the general laws of Massachusetts, Chapter 44, recommending that the City Council approve the expenditure of $2,226,390.51 from DPW Water desal fixed charge to Aquaria Water LLC. Invited DPW Commissioner Patrick Hill, Chief Financial Officer Dr. Troy Clarkson.
Doctor.
Thank you again, Mr. Chairman, and I'm quite certain that the empty seat next to me will soon be filled by Mr. Hill. Look at that. So I'll give you a brief history on this from a financial perspective, and then Pat can provide any details. But you'll remember during the budget process for last year, for fiscal year 24, you made some cuts to the proposed FY24 water enterprise budget, including some money intended for the payment to Aquaria for our contract at the desal plant. And at the time, I believe the desire was to bring in the folks from Aquaria to have a conversation with them prior to restoring the budget to be able to pay this portion of the contract. That, in fact, occurred. By the time it occurred, there simply wasn't enough time to then schedule a visit here and to appropriate the money out of last year's budget. So what we're asking you to do is to fulfill the entirety of last year's contract with Aquaria with this appropriation, and that will sort of set us square for last year. And we're working on this year's budget. As I noted to you over the weekend, we may or may not come back to you to look to supplement the budget, but I know Pat will explain to you that he has implemented some pretty significant austerity measures within the water enterprise, and we may be able to pay the entirety of this within this year's budget. But I would simply ask that you stay tuned and be prepared for a request to increase the budget towards the end of the year. But right now, we're asking for this appropriation to meet our obligations of the contract with Aquaria.
Councilor Castro.
Thank you. Good evening, gentlemen. So I reviewed the bills that you submitted to us in our packet, and they're dated April 30th, May 31st, and June 30th. There was no opportunity to pay them?
There was no money to pay them, Councilor. The appropriation was cut by $2 million.
I remember.
We had, it's $8.9 million a year to run the Aquaria plant on the fixed fee. That brought the total appropriation in the budget down to $6 million. We offset some of those costs with the variable fee, but we were not able to capture them all.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilor. Anyone else?
Go ahead.
Well, the comment back to Councilor Castro makes me wonder, if the bill was in April 30th, that would have been an FY24, would it not?
That's correct.
All three of them.
So we would have paid it out of FY24, not FY25.
Oh, that's right. That's correct. That's why we're rolling these bills into FY25 budget to pay them with FY25 money.
With FY25 money?
Correct.
I can follow up on that, Councilor. In the narrative provided to you, I specifically noted that this was the payment of a prior year bill, but it's by design because the council reduced the budget for last year, so there were not, as Pat mentioned, were not funds available to pay it. So it's an appropriate. There are several items on this agenda paying prior year bills for different reasons. As I noted again in my narrative, not on this one, but on the others, one of those reasons is because the auditing department has significantly tightened up their procedures and not allowing prior year bills to pass through. So you've seen more prior year bills than you have in previous years because of the improved processes in auditing. But this specifically is a direct result of the legislative action that you took in reducing the FY24 budget.
Okay. All right, I remember what we did, and I remember why we did it. I will tell you, I'm not usually in favor of paying such a large amount from FY25, but now if you tell me we may have to come back and have a supplemental, I don't want to get into rolling things over, which I think other entities have done, so let's just keep an eye on this, Dr. Clarkson.
I will tell you, Counselor, too, that I've been working with my business manager to look through our budget to try to sustain this cost within this year's budget, which will not require us to come back for a supplemental appropriation. We have already started encumbering money in areas that we feel as though we can make adjustments in. So I think we'll be okay. I can't promise you anything if something drastic happens, if we need to use Aquarium for a long term and we eat up a lot of our non-fixed costs. That might be different, but as it stands now, if things don't change, we might be okay.
Okay, because if we cut FY24 by 2.6 million, it just meant the money remained with the city, available for appropriation and use. You're just using it you're just using the enterprise funds in it from FY25.
Correct.
Okay, all right. Sorry to be so picky, but you know how I follow things. Thank you.
What we're here for.
Feel better?
I feel much better, yes, thank you.
Councilor Durancourt.
Excellent. So, but I'm not. Let me just put it to you like this, though. This is a lot of money, and obviously, you know, with the financial situation the city has been facing, and if we had to pay this bill, let me just put it to you like this. Prior to April 2024, did you guys know that you wouldn't be able to pay that bill?
We did, Council. When the budget was cut initially through the budget process in FY24 budget hearings, we knew that our obligation, our contractual obligation, it was not sufficient to pay the bill.
And this council was informed about that,
Correct.
Meaning
During the process, yes.
Okay, so, I mean, I just don't get it. I mean, I'll tell you this, because if this is something that was supposed to be paid in 2023, 2024, and now we're going to use, you know, the budget money for 2024, 2025 to pay for it. I mean, it's a lot with the financial situation the city has been going on to. And this is a large amount of money to pay back. And at the end of the day, you know, I feel like, you know, instead of like moving out of this, we are still where we were before. Because I can guarantee you this is not the only bill that the city council voted on to pay backlog. And with that being said, you know, I'm not comfortable with this. And I know it's going to pass, but I will vote against it. I just want to say this. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
If I might, just in answer to the statement of the councilor, I think I won't speak for the commissioner, but I'm guessing he and I both agree. But again, this amount is a contractual obligation of the city, of which the city was aware, and we presented you a balanced budget for the enterprise, including raising sufficient revenue to pay this and other bills. But it was the action of the council in reducing the budget that made the money not available. And I believe we came back and requested the restoration of the budget, and the council elected not, at the time, not to support that. And so the contractual obligation of the city to pay the bill still remains. And there are sufficient revenues in the enterprise to pay it. So I just want to be clear, Councilor, that this is not a case where we didn't have enough money to pay the bill, so we're kicking the can down the road. There was last year sufficient revenue to pay the bill. There is sufficient revenue this year to pay the bill. We're simply responding to the legislative action of the council and trying to meet our obligations.
So then why do we wait until November? I mean, obviously this budget was passed in July. Why do we wait until November, which is the end of the year, to come up with this? Why didn't we do it in August, September, October? I mean, I understand that, maybe there's a due date to pay this bill. Why now?
Well, much like, Counselor, as you'll see some of these other bills from last year that have come in, a lot of the bills in the enterprise funds, whether it be from a police department or something like that, these bills come in late. I know we have an obligation to pay these bills. Rather than bring these bills back several different times, I waited for all the bills to come, and we filed at the end of October.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Councilor Thompson?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And just quickly, so last year when we cut it from the budget, we didn't lose the money. It just essentially became retained earnings inside the enterprise, correct?
That's correct.
And then we're unable to use those retained earnings to pay for this bill because they're not available for usage until next year. Is that correct?
The retained earnings won't get certified till sometime in March or April, and I do not believe that we can use retained earnings to offset costs in this year's budget. That's correct.
So the monies that we're using to pay this bill is just coming from our normal operational budget in our sewer, our water enterprise account?
That's correct.
Okay, and then you said that potentially, and we're hoping not. I know you're doing a great job with your budget manager, and hoping that we don't have to come back to supplement that water enterprise. But if we had to in the future, that would be kind of how we pay these other bills by collecting monies from other departments or whatever that has available funds to meet whatever we need in our enterprise, or does it all come from the water department itself?
I don't want to speak for the CFO, but, in an enterprise fund, a lot of it depends on revenues, revenue projections, and then revenues collected. If we find that the revenues collected are higher than anticipated, then we can simply raise and appropriate before the end of the year based off of the revenues.
Okay, so that money's always available then to raise and appropriate if our projected revenues are higher than essentially what we predicted?
I believe so, correct.
Yeah. Yes, but it functions a little different in an enterprise than it does in the general fund. So our schedule this year, with the assistance of the Department of Revenue, is a little more aggressive than in prior years. So Pat won't have to wait until March for the retained earnings to be certified. We do anticipate that they'll probably, hopefully, be certified by the end of this calendar year. And so should we need those extra funds, the process would be that we would come back to this council and ask you to approve a transfer from those retained earnings to the enterprise budget to address any additional needs that we had. But as Pat stated, we probably won't do that until sometime in the spring, because we really want to see if we can effectively manage the budget and absorb these costs within this year's budget.
Right. Okay, understood. And then there's an expectation if you do have to come back, there's plenty of money in the retained earnings to cover whatever budget gap may exist.
The water enterprise consistently is the best performing.
Yeah.
Although, just a little precursor of things to come, we did note to you during the discussion on the sewer and refuse rates that the rate study that Pat had prepared, we are providing sufficient revenue to run the enterprise every year, but that includes a substantial use of retained earnings to balance the budget every year. And what we're really trying to do is to create a sustainable enterprise that survives on the rates itself. So this is no surprise. We've discussed this from this table before, but we do anticipate sometime in your next legislative session to come to you with a comprehensive plan to address the rates in the water enterprise.
I mean, absolutely. Our enterprise funds, our enterprise fund has to operate within the revenue it receives, and that we can use our retained earnings for the capital improvements that we definitely need throughout the city. So let's hope that, we'll work with you to make that happen. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate it. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you, Councilor. Commissioner, if I could just ask you one quick question.
Sure.
With the drought affecting the city and the region, have you been able to draw water from Aquaria, and have you had any problems drawing water from Aquaria?
So we took just over a month's worth of water from Aquaria in the end of September and the entire month of October. We were taking 1.5 million gallons a day. I had no issues. I made a phone call. They were able to turn it on the next day. It ran for 45 days consistently. I had no issues. I had no infrastructure issues. They did not have to shut down for any reason. A lot of the improvements that needed to be made that were causing the issues in the past have been done. So I do not foresee having problems in the future if I do need them. But this year, I don't know, because you're right, we are in a drought. The Silver Lake is 51 inches down today. That is not typical for this time of year. We've not seen any rainfall. There's not enough water in the Montponset pond to divert into Silver Lake, which is where we usually are able to balance off Silver Lake. So, 51 inches down in real numbers is about 1 billion gallons. So we may need to start taking Aquaria water at some point soon, but we're going to continue to watch the weather and hope that things change.
It probably would make sense to continue to draw from Aquaria then.
It's a finance thing. It's certainly not cheap. We could take 3.8 million gallons a day. That's, the contractual obligation. That's give or take, I think it's about $7,200 a day to do that. It does get very costly, obviously. Quick math, it's about $220,000, $230,000 a month. I don't know that the budget could sustain that for any long term, but it may come to that.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Motion to recommend favorably.
Second?
A motion has been properly made in second to recommend this item favorably to the entire City Council. All those in favor? Anyone opposed? It carries. Thank you, sir.
Item 8, ordered in accordance with the general laws of Massachusetts, Chapter 44, recommending the City Council approve the expenditure of $4,035.40 from DPW refuse purchase of services, $3,235.40 from DPW refuse goods and supplies, $800, to American Retro Works, Inc., $3,235.40, to FBS Tire Recycling, Inc., $800. Invited Commissioner Pat Hill, Chief Financial Officer Troy Clarkson.
Mr. Hill.
So this, much like the other bills, these are bills that come in to the refuse. There's plenty of money in the refuse. The intent is to roll this money into this year's budget. It's a very small amount of money. This bill did not come in until the end of August. Again, rather than put several different orders in front of you, I chose to wait and file them all at once.
Motion to recommend favorably.
Second.
A motion has been properly made in second to recommend number 8 favorably. All those in favor? All those opposed? It carries. Number 9.
Item 9, ordered in accordance with the general laws of Massachusetts, Chapter 44, recommending that the City Council approve the expenditure of $726,325.44 from DPW sewer purchase of services to Southworth Milton, Inc., $1,140.48, to Constellation New Energy, Inc., $160,191.92, to Veolia Water North America, Operations, Inc., $539,336.17, to Plymouth County Sheriff's Department, $4,788, to the Brockton Police, $15,768.87, to W. Robert Patterson and Associates, $5,100. Invited DPW Commissioner Pat Hill, Chief Financial Officer Troy Clarkson.
You again.
Okay, me again. So this situation, slightly different than the other situations. The sewer, as you all know, prior to raising rates, we tried to squeeze every single penny out of the sewer enterprise fund last year. The remaining balance was that total of the $726,000. We are comfortably able to say that we can carry all those costs in this year's budget and not come back for another appropriation.
Motion to recommend favorably.
Second.
On the motion.
On the motion. Thank you. Good evening, gentlemen, again. So the largest amount in this group of bills to be paid is to Veolia. It's $539,000 plus. And so I read the bill, which was included in our packet. It was for some emergency service, but it's a lot of money. So can you give us some detail on that?
Emergency service. Let me just double check that, Counselor.
If you just give me a second, I actually have all of the bills here, but I just have to find it in this packet.
Sure.
Can I just suggest, Mr. Chairman, that perhaps we go on to there's several hundred pages here. We'll just go on to the next item while I locate this bill for Pat.
All right, so we'll hold off on that. Let's go on to number 10, and then we'll come back to number 9.
Item 10, ordered in accordance with the general laws of Massachusetts, Chapter 44, recommending that the City Council approve the expenditure of $47,466.82 from DPW Water Purchase of Services, $45,434.95 from DPW Water Goods and Supplies, $2,031.87 to East Bridgewater Police Department, $7,727.50 to Cummins, Inc., $815.15 to the Brockton Police Department, $35,272.30 to the Whitman Police Department, $660 to the Town of Holbrook, $960 to Regan Supply / Stiles Company, Inc., $200 to HD Supply, $1,153.59, to Home Depot, $79.98, to Chadwick Barros, $598.30. Invited DPW Commissioner Pat Hill, Chief Financial Officer Troy Clarkson.
Safe to assume that some of these are road details?
They're all road details, and it is important to note, too, that the way that the process works with the water and sewer, especially with SRF projects, it's not just get the bill, pay the bill. All the SRF jobs, because it's a reimbursable expense through the program, are submitted to our consultant, reviewed by our consultant. There's a lot of back and forth, so a lot of times we don't even see police bills for 2 to 3 months, because there's a lot of confirmation that goes back and forth before we even get them. So when you have it's almost impossible to encumber money and you'll see the same thing happen with the sewer, to any particular police department, because we don't have any of that stuff prior to July 15th, which is when the books were closed. So.
Motion to recommend favorably.
Second. Motion has been properly made in second to move number 10 favorably to the entire City Council. All those in favor? Anyone opposed? It carries.
Yeah, that's just
Dr. Clarkson, have you found it, or shall we continue?
Yes, Mr. Hill has the bills now.
All right, let's go back to number 9.
So the bill, Counselor, to Veolia, and I'm glad I did not speak prior to that, but a large portion of that bill, $504,000, is 1 month of treatment services at the sewer plant. The emergency bill that you're talking about, the $34,533, which would complete that total balance, that was an emergency repair to a generator. We did not expect that expense. It came very late in the year. It's one of those items that we simply cannot live without. The generator, if we lose power at the sewer plant, the generators don't kick on. Obviously, we have a lot of issues. So it came very late in the year, and that was after we had encumbered money within the department to pay all the other expenses, so we did not expect it.
Okay, talk to me about $504,000 for 1 month of what sort of treatment?
That's the cost to run the sewer plant from Veolia. That's a monthly expense.
And why wasn't that incorporated into the budget? Why was that in excess of the budget amount?
We did not have the adequate funds to support the budget last year. We knew that kind of going into the year. We tried everything we possibly could, cut every expense we possibly could to try to maintain through the year. Obviously, we could not do that. That's why we put the sewer rate increases in front of you. We're confident this year that we're going to be able to not only capture last year's expenses, but comfortably get through this year as well. You know, the underlying or big question mark in the sewer budget's always going to be the biosolids and the removal and disposal of them. We have a controlled price for that for another year, but after that, you know, it just, it potentially could be coming back for more increases. The market fluctuates quite a bit. The past several years, it's only gone up. We hope that does not continue, but we don't know.
And is the sludge still going to Connecticut?
The sludge now goes to New York. So half of the trucks go to New York. The other half of the trucks, it's the hauler's responsibility for the disposal. Some of it goes to Seneca, New York, and some Seneca Falls, and some of it goes to Rhode Island to incinerator.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilor. And we had already a motion and a second, so does anybody else on the motion want to chime in? All right, so a motion has been properly made in second. All those in favor? Anyone opposed? Number 11.
Thank you, councilors.
Number 9 carries, so we're moving on to number 11.
Ordered that the following named sum be, and the same is hereby transferred, as the same was submitted by the mayor as follows. Transfer of $99,556 from Cable Revolving Fund to Brockton Community Access. Invited BCA President Joe Miranda, BCA Executive Director Scott Mercer, Chief Financial Officer Troy Clarkson.
Councilors, I do know that Mr. Miranda is out of state, and Mr. Mercer has been out sick for a week. And I spoke via email with Dr. Clarkson, and he's going to provide us with some info on this.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm happy to represent Mr. Mercer and the chair, Mr. Miranda. The mayor and I met with them both, and then Chief of Staff Sidney Marrow and I met with Mr. Mercer some time ago. In your packet is a letter from BCA detailing the $99,000 request, and it includes the upgrade of 2 different teleprompter devices, as well as some switchers and some additional HVAC for the building, and that totals the $99,556. And I did check with the budget director today, who confirmed that as of today, there's over $940,000 in the cable revolving fund, so there are more than sufficient funds to approve this request.
Motion to recommend favorably.
Second.
A motion has been properly made in second to recommend 11 favorably. All those in favor? Anyone opposed? It carries. Number 12.
Item 12, in accordance with the general laws of Massachusetts, Chapter 44, recommending that the City Council approve the expenditure of $46,736.12 from Finance Purchase of Services to Public Consulting Group, LLC. Invited Chief Financial Officer Troy Clarkson.
Doctor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Like many of the others that you just approved from DPW, Public Consulting Group has for many years provided support to the city in pursuing Medicaid reimbursements, and this was an invoice that was received after the year had closed.
Motion to recommend favorably.
Second.
A motion has been properly made in second to recommend 12 favorably. All those in favor? Anyone opposed? It carries. Number 13.
Item 13, ordered that the City of Brockton has been designated as a gateway community by the Commonwealth, and that the Commonwealth has implemented the Housing Development Incentive Program, HDIP, to encourage the development of market-rate housing in gateway communities through state tax credits to qualified development projects. The mayor, as Chief Executive Officer, is hereby authorized to submit an amendment to the Downtown Brockton Housing Development Incentive Plan and zone to the Commonwealth of Massachusetts Department of Housing and Community Development for its review and approval. The mayor, as chief executive officer and acting through the director of planning and economic development, is further hereby authorized to act as the city's administrator of the HTIP plan and is authorized to enter into real estate tax increment exemption agreements between the City of Brockton and qualified housing development projects, subject to favorable recommendation by the Brockton TIF Committee and approval by the City Council. Invited, Honorable Mayor Robert F. Sullivan, Chief Financial Officer Troy Clarkson, Director of Planning and Economic Development Rob May.
Good evening, councilors. Thank you for inviting me here today. As we heard this, earlier this evening with Mr. Stephen Young and his project on West Elm Street, the Housing Development Incentive Program is a state-sponsored project that provides tax credits for the creation of market rate housing. And it's been a very successful project here in Brockton. We've had several projects, including 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 that I can think of off the top of my head. What we're here this evening now is asking for an expansion of our current boundary going north. You have in your out of your packet, you had our full application, but I put 2 copies of the maps on your desks this evening. The larger map shows the greater overall district, and the smaller map shows a more defined area. So we're talking about an area from North Main on the west to the railroad tracks on the east, and from Linden on the south to Charles on the north. It's a little bit more than a full block and a half of space. There's a couple of buildings there that have gone through the zoning process and have approval to be some converted or constructed fresh for multifamily residential. And this program, expansion of this program would help support the financing of those projects.
Councilor Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good evening, Mr. May. So essentially, this is an expansion of our current HDIP zone. As you stated, there are 2 current projects that are within this new expanded zone that have gone through the ZBA process and have been approved by that board for building those 2 new market rate housing developments. So just a couple questions. Is there a limit to our ability to expand the HDIP? Or does it have to be within some sort of predetermined residential or commercial area, or is it within the purview of this council and the mayor to expand that HDIP zone as far as we see fit?
It is the purview of the council and the mayor to expand those. We are looking at other areas. We'll be coming forward with you with one for the Campello neighborhood. As we finish up the Montello master plan, we will have a recommendation there. Likewise, we should see some, there's some property on the east side, I'm sure, that would favor this market rate development. The only constraining factor is the state's ability to fund projects. They, with the last housing bond bill, there's new money that's been put into this program. They've increased the amount that's available each year. They're trying to ration out to 1 or 2 projects per municipality per year. But we continue to advocate that if there are some gateway city communities that aren't able to take advantage of this, that those funds should be then reallocated to other gateway communities that are ready to go.
Definitely, and especially the communities in which the market rate housing, the gap between market rate and the financial ability to support those projects are greater in certain gateway communities than they are in other communities. So
that is correct. And even though we talk about it being market rate, we have Brockton rents and we have Brockton construction costs,
Right.
which are the same as Boston, and so there is always a gap.
Right.
Sorry, I missed half the room.
So even within the 26 gateway communities, there is a disparity between
Yes.
the ability to build market rate in some communities compared to others. So our ability to expand this HDIP will give other developers the ability to kind of fill in that gap. And I definitely support the expansion of this zone and the expansion of the HDIP zone further from the downtown. Although I represent downtown and I'm happy with the boundaries being downtown and expanding. This is also my ward, but they're going south and down along some of the properties, like you said, in Campello and further north in the Montello district. I think a lot of different developers
And east and west.
and east and west definitely can benefit from having the ability to access HDIP funding. And so I definitely support the expansion of HDIP. I'm hoping to see additional expansion of the zone throughout the city.
Yes, sir.
And I just encourage my fellow city councilors to support this order. Thank you, Mr. May.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Castro.
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. May.
Good evening.
Call me tomorrow. So this is my question. Why would we not want to extend the HDIP?
In order to, for a developer to be able to apply for the housing tax credits from the Commonwealth,
Right.
the community needs to enter into a tax increment exemption or tie agreement. Those tie agreements require the review of both of the city's financial and TIF and tie committee, but also the review and acceptance of the city council. So it's not that we wouldn't want to, it's just it requires a couple of steps in order that we fully vet these projects and that the city knows exactly how much tax revenue that these projects are going to generate over time.
So perhaps we would say the reason we might not want to do it is if we didn't want to give tax breaks to stimulate development.
In some neighborhoods, we might not want to do that, or might not need to do that.
But it stimulates development,
Yes, it does, ma'am.
which is a good thing. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Powell.
Mr. May, if you look at this map,
Yes, sir.
Council, the chair pointed out to me, it's very interesting how the HDIP slices down. It looks like Montello Street, and instead of blocking everything off, why would we have this little sliver of approved area?
The tail of the tadpole that runs down picks up the Corcoran Building, which is a city-owned asset which will be going up, is finishing up environmental remediation and should be going out earlier. I should mention that the Housing Development Incentive Program is one of the layers of what we call the 7-layer dip, and so that's where we've added as many incentive programs as we can get, including historic preservation and new market tax credits and all the like, and it reflects goals that were established in the Downtown Action Strategy, so it identifies very specific buildings, and at the time, council didn't want to do a blanket tax deduction for everybody, but it much more targeted, and that's how we had the original boundary. So it includes specific areas, and that's why you have these little tentacles sticking out.
All right, and I want to go back to just a comment that Commissioner Hill made, because as we approve these various HDIP projects, and as we hear about reconfiguring the Elm Court Hotel into market apartments, what I never hear is, are we keeping a running tally of what stresses that will put on our water system? In other words, if we're already taking a look at the fact that we need to use Aquaria because we're in a drought right now, hopefully that will not exacerbate itself, but we never seem to discuss that. In other words, where will we be 5 years from now if all of these different projects come to fruition? what will our consumption be in gallons per day? And will we be able to do that without entering into either excessive fees paid to Aquaria or looking at some other options? And I guess you don't have to answer this tonight, but as your office takes a look at these projects, maybe you and the council and the commissioner, maybe we should start having those conversations about where is this going to put us on our consumption level for Silver Lake and/or Aquaria or both?
I do know it is an issue that has been discussed with the mayor and Mr. Hill and myself in various different conversations, and that is why we're very careful about intermunicipal agreements. We want to make sure that we have the water assets to support Brockton development first.
Well, if we do any intermunicipal agreements, I'd be willing to trade. If they need our sewer system, I'll trade that for some water. Let's see what can work out. So, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councilor.
Motion to recommend favorably.
Second.
A motion has been properly made and second to recommend 13 favorably. All those in favor? Anyone opposed? It carries.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Number 14.
Order that the City Council authorizes the acceptance and expenditure of the total grant funds in the amount of $150,000 from the Executive Office of Administration and Finance to the City of Brockton. Invited Chief Financial Officer Troy Clarkson.
Well, Dr. Clarkson, this is pretty good. This is money coming in, which is a good discussion to have.
Indeed, and the information is in your packet, Mr. Chairman, but I did provide a little more detail in my memo to you. This is the Commonwealth's Community Compact Grant Program. I do believe that this is the largest Community Compact Grant in the history of the Community Compact Grant Program. This speaks to Councilor Farwell's notion earlier about the Commonwealth, specifically the Department of Revenue's commitment to success in Brockton. This grant is part of the DOR's mentorship program, where they provide technical assistance to communities throughout the Commonwealth. They encouraged us to put this application in, and it was specifically geared toward technical assistance and a wide variety of financial matters, but including long-range financial planning, strategy with collective bargaining for both the city and the schools, and developing long-range approaches to funding for both the city and for the Brockton Public Schools. As I noted, I do anticipate at some time in the future coming to you with a request for the city to have some skin in the game and also make a financial commitment. This will likely result in us putting out some sort of RFP or request to hire consultants to come in and provide that technical assistance. But it is a clear and unequivocal statement from the Commonwealth that they want to help, they want us to be successful, and they're providing us with funds to be able to do that.
Motion to recommend favorably.
Second.
Motion has been properly made in second to recommend 14 favorably. All those in favor? Anyone opposed? It carries. 15, sir.
Ordered that the City Council authorize the revocation of the general fund subsidy to the Parks and Recreation Department in the FY25 budget in the amount of $400,000. Invited Superintendent of Parks Tim Carpenter, Chief Financial Officer Troy Clarkson.
Mr. Chairman, I can start on this, and I know Tim is here if you have any questions for him. This is yet another recommended action from the Department of Revenue in the memo that is part of your packet. If you remember, during the budget process and in that budget order was a general fund subsidy from the city to support Parks and Recreation. Also part of that budget order, as with all the enterprises, was an administrative reimbursement from the enterprise back to the city. And the point that the DOR made is it's essentially a wash. You should rescind that because the actual appropriation could potentially take us over the overall levy limit. But I assure you that this does not impact the Parks and Recreation Department's ability to do its job, nor is it reducing their budget.
Just on, Mr. Chairman, just on the wording, instead of authorize the revocation, shouldn't we just revoke? Shouldn't it just read that we revoke the general fund subsidy? I mean, who are we authorizing if it's not us?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that both versions of the wording have the same effect. I will tell you that my team and legislative counsel worked closely on the language for these, but it doesn't appear to me, at least, that change would be substantive, but I would defer to legislative counsel since she's here.
Counselor, I think the clerk has a...
Attorney Resnick actually wrote this. It's 6 1, half dozen the other, how it's worded. This is fine as worded. Rather than make an amendment, this is fine. All right, that's fine then. Thank you.
Councilor Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Clarkson, I was trying to follow your explanation, but I just kind of want to wrap my head around it. So we provided a general fund subsidy to the Parks and Recreation in the fiscal year 24 budget, 25 budget for $400,000. DOR's recommended that we remove the language authorizing that subsidy. You're stating that there's no change to their budget, but we're not giving them $400,000. So I just, if you could then take it from there.
In the budget, the city was providing a subsidy. In that same budget, the enterprise was providing an administrative reimbursement back to the general fund, which all of the enterprises do. And so this portion of it was essentially a wash. And so rather than engage in that complex exchange of funds, which had a net impact of 0. And by the way, when we put the budget together, we knew that. I thought it was important to recognize that the enterprises had and have an obligation to pay the city back for our administrative support. But I think in the last year, as we've discussed several times tonight, the DOR has been paying more particular attention and providing feedback on ways that they would prefer to see that done. And so this was the result of that review.
So did we have something specific that $400,000 subsidy was aimed for? Was it for the administrative assistance? Why were we giving them the subsidy if we knew they were just going to give us money for our administrative support and that it was a wash? What was the underlying purpose of the subsidy originally?
Well, the underlying purpose of the subsidy was that the revenues of the enterprise are not generally sufficient, and I'll go back and give you the specifics, but the total amount of the subsidy was more than that. But as I said at the time, it is appropriate, and most communities in Massachusetts use general funds to support parks and recreation.
Right.
So the entirety of Tim Carpenter's operation is not supported by the revenue at the golf course, nor should it be.
Right.
It's appropriate for us to spend money on public recreation. This portion of it, though, was simply a recognition that we hired a consultant a few years ago to determine specifically what that administrative contribution should be from all of the enterprises. And so there's actually a formula behind those calculations. But this is really just cleaning it up. And so for a portion of it, there's money in, money out. They're saying that that's not necessary.
So moving forward, we would recognize what their contribution to us for their administrative services would be, and then we would subtract that from whatever subsidy that we were seeking to give to them, and then that way we're not moving those shells around.
I anticipate for the 26 budget, that's the way we will format it,
Okay.
Yes.
Understood. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Lally, did you? Good.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dr. Clarkson, good evening.
Good evening.
So DOR says this has to be done. And this,
Correct.
And you say this has no adverse effect on the Parks Department.
Correct.
So we vote on this, we pass it. When does the actual action take place? When does this money get moved?
So that it's all part of the FY25 budget. The reason why it's before you now is because we did get a letter from the Department of Revenue with a list of items that they would like to see addressed before we set the tax rate, so that's why it's before you now.
Yeah, so I know that part. So when we vote on this tonight, tomorrow, that money's going to, tomorrow it's going to be revoked.
No, I mean, well, technically, you still have to make a final vote of it, and then there's the, 3 or 4 day passage for the mayor to sign, but shortly thereafter, yes. I will tell you that from an accounting perspective, and I'll check with the auditor on this, but generally, some of those subsidies and the administrative contribution, if you look at the monthly revenue reports we provide you, I'm going to guess that right now, that says, in that revenue report says 0, because usually those administrative contributions aren't processed until later in the year. So I believe, although I'm not certain, that that hasn't even been transacted yet.
Okay, so we're getting it before it's, okay. All right, thank you, Dr. Clarkson. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else? Sorry, Council.
It's okay, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Carpenter, can I ask you a question?
This one is going to get postponed.
So obviously we voted on this to pass it. Simple. What impact will this have on you? I want to be real though.
So I think to Dr. Clarkson's point, I think it's sort of in a way a sort of a reimbursement to the city is the way I'm sort of looking at it. I don't think it's going to have a negative impact on my current operating budget.
So, Dr. Clarkson, again, congratulations. So you were asked to remove money from different places, and among those places, this department was one of the target. Why this department?
So I will quote to you the letter from October 22nd from the Department of Revenue, and their exact wording was, the City Council must vote to revoke $400,000 of the general fund subsidy to the Park and Recreation Enterprise. There should be no subsidy for the indirect costs of $400,000, as these are already appropriated in the general fund.
Excellent. So let's say that we choose not to revoke it. What would be the consequences?
The consequence would be that the Department of Revenue would likely not certify our tax rate, and tax bills won't go out.
So by virtue of the certification of our tax rate, we have to sacrifice that department. That's my understanding, though.
I would disagree with that statement, Councilor.
I mean, I'm not saying that it's true. That's why I'm asking you those questions, right? So,
no, so because what the DOR is saying is the way it was presented, that the money is flowing to and from in the same amount. And so rather than, and I think our discussion tonight is emblematic of the fact that it can be confusing. And so what they're simply saying is there should be no subsidy for the indirect cost, as these are already appropriated in the general fund. And so the Parks and Recreation is not losing any money. We are simply not taking a vote to subsidize the department with the general fund of $400,000 and then pulling it back.
So let me just say this to you, right? For 2025 and 2026 budget, right? Let's say 2026 next year, this will not be on the book because there is no need for it.
Correct.
So with that being said, Mr. Carpenter, by virtue of the CFO statement, that $400,000, this is something that will be wiped out of your budget. And you okay with that?
So again, I'm not sure that's exactly how this works. Again, I'm not a finance major. I play one on TV, but I'm not a finance major. And I think there's reference to it earlier. I think the general fund subsidy to the Park and Recreation Department is right around $650,000, somewhere in there. So this is simply a portion of that that I expect will be essentially brought back through the general fund so it's not doubled up.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. CFO.
Just to close this out, if I was sitting at home watching this, I'd be reaching for a strong drink. So basically, we took $400,000, well, we took money out of the general fund, and we gave it to the park department. Now we're just taking back a portion of what we gave them. We took general fund revenue for the park department for FY25, and we're just simply taking, if it was $600,000, we're taking back $400,000 of that. Am I correct?
Yes.
And it goes back into the general fund, which means that it's then available for appropriation for some other purpose. Or so I just don't want people to think that we're neutering Mr. Carpenter and his department here tonight.
Very important to note that, yes, there is
Thank you.
no cut to the budget on this agenda for the Parks Department. In fact, Tim and I have been, Mr. Carpenter and I have been working together because he has additional needs, and we likely will be coming back to you sometime soon to ask you to address some of those additional needs in the department.
Have we had a motion yet? Or? Motion to recommend favorably.
Second.
A motion has been properly made and second to recommend 15 favorably. All those in favor? Anyone opposed? It carries. Number 16, sir.
Ordered in accordance with the general laws of Massachusetts, Chapter 44, recommending that the City Council approve the expenditure of $26,832.93 from Police Department purchase of services to Verizon, $16,955.76, to SureTech Inc., $4,613, to Plymouth County Sheriff's Department, $4,564, to New Era Technologies, $300, to Gannett New England and Local Gannett New England Local IQ, $290.71, to the City of Brockton, $110. Invited Police Chief Brenda Perez or designee, Chief Financial Officer Troy Clarkson.
Captain, welcome.
I'm not Brenda.
Not Brenda.
We did receive an email from the chief that the captain will be here tonight.
Mr. Chairman, I'm happy to be here with designee, also known as Captain McNulty, and this is similar to some of the others, that these were bills that were received after the deadline. They are in your packet, so they are bills that we're asking you to pay.
Motion to recommend favorably.
Second.
Mr. Chairman,
Go
could the record reflect that Councilor Griffin is absent? We take care of that. Yeah, thank you.
Motion has been properly made in second. All those in favor? Anyone opposed? I see Derek actually approved it as well, so which is a good thing down there. Number 17.
Item 17, ordered that the City Council authorizes the acceptance and expenditure of a donation in the amount of $1,000 from Northeastern Savings Bank to Brockton Police Department. Invited Police Chief Brenda Perez or designee, Chief Financial Officer Troy Clarkson.
Welcome, Virginia.
Good evening.
Go ahead, ma'am.
Thank you. So on behalf of the police department, we'd like to thank the Northeastern Savings Bank for their generous donation. These funds will be utilized for the purchase of food and giveaways for our Jamboree community event.
Motion to recommend favorably.
Second.
Motion has been properly made in second to recommend 17 favorably. All those in favor? Anyone opposed? It carries. 18, sir.
Ordered that the City Council authorizes the acceptance and expenditure of the total grant funds in the amount of $60,000 from the Executive Office of Public Safety and Security to the Brockton Police Department. Invited Police Chief Brenda Perez or designee, Chief Financial Officer Troy Clarkson.
You're up again.
Thank you again. Good evening, councilors. For the FY25 Municipal Road Safety Grant, we received the max award, which is $60,000. This is based on our population. In FY24, these funds are utilized for traffic enforcement and education. And in FY24, we were able to cover 173 shifts, which totaled 660 hours. This covers 6 traffic enforcement campaigns as well as 6 ped bike campaigns. And there is no match for this grant.
Motion to recommend favorably.
Second. Motion has been properly made in second to recommend 18 favorably. All those in favor? Anyone opposed? It carries.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a good night, ma'am.
Thank you, you too.
Number 19, sir.
Ordered that the City Council authorize a revocation of retained earnings to balance the refuse enterprise in the fiscal year 25 budget in the amount of $294,639. Invited Chief Financial Officer Troy Clarkson.
Another revocation.
Yes, Mr. Chairman and members of the Finance Committee, thank you. I would call your attention in that same DOR letter of October 22nd to item number 3B, which necessitated this vote. I will just read the language from the DOR and then explain it to you. The DOR says in that item, the budget book for the Refuse Enterprise Fund indicates an intention for the city to use $294,639 of retained earnings towards its FY25 enterprise budget. As noted earlier, this enterprise fund will have a negative retained earnings certification as of June 30th. Therefore, the council will need to either make reductions to the refuse enterprise budget or vote another available fund such as free cash after its certification or the stabilization fund as a funding source to this enterprise fund. DLS will not approve the current A2 without one of these actions being taken by the council. So a couple of things. One, thank you again. This council did vote increases in the refuse rates last year, and so we do believe that there will be sufficient revenue in this year to address this year's budget for the enterprise. And in working with the Department of Revenue, they concur with that assessment. So the revenue increases that you voted are sufficient to handle the budget. Unfortunately, though, those increases did not sufficiently address the costs of the enterprise for last year. And so we are working with Legislative Council and the clerk to prepare a request for you, once free cash is certified, to use some free cash to cover the shortfall in the enterprise for last year. So what the DOR is saying in this order is it doesn't make sense if you're going to have negative retained earnings to then compound that by adding another $294,000 on top of it. That the revenues from the rate increase are sufficient to meet the budget, so they're asking us to rescind that appropriation so that the enterprise for this year will survive simply on the rate charges. But I do want to be clear, we are working on 3 transfers once free cash is certified to address those enterprises where you increased the rates, but that the revenues were not sufficient to meet the obligations in FY24.
Motion to recommend favorably.
Second.
Your motion has been properly made and second to recommend 19 favorably. All those in favor? Anyone opposed? It carries. Number 20, sir.
20, ordered that the City Council authorize the acceptance and expenditure of the total grant funds in the amount of $20,655 from Lieutenant Joseph D. Bernardo Foundation to the Brockton Fire Department. Invited Fire Chief Brian Nardelli, Chief Financial Officer Troy Clarkson.
Chief, hello again.
Hello again, Mr. Chair. Good evening, councilors. January 23rd of 2005, the FDNY suffered the loss of 3 of its members in the Bronx on a cold, wintry blizzard day in a 6-story tenement that was cut up, multiple rooms built on top of multiple rooms. One of the finding factors that came out after that fire was some of the firefighters that were trapped in there and had to jump out the windows because they didn't have accessibility of ladders and aerials, was due to the fact that they had to jump from 6 stories to get out of the building. Since then, there have been all different types of developments into self-rescue ropes and different things of that nature. Lieutenant Joseph DiPanato was a lieutenant of Truck 167 that was in the Bronx that early cold morning. He jumped and later succumbed to his injuries. His father, who was a retired FDNY firefighter, came up with the Joey DiBonato Fund. There's 2 major training components throughout the country every year that firefighters gather, one in Texas and one just 2 weeks ago down in Long Island. This fund goes to, when you apply for this grant, which is a non-matching grant, this fund goes to fire departments that are looking to increase the safety and survival of their firefighters. This year, Deputy Chief DePasquale and I discussed the potential of putting in for stealth rescue self-escaping ropes. We received $20,655. That will buy 45 stealth rescue kits, one for each riding position on every truck, so that every firefighter in the city of Brockton, they won't have their own personal one, but when they come to work, it'll be on the truck for them to use, just like the SCBAs that they wear. So that's what this grant is for. Once it's certified, we'll be able to reach out to Northeast Rescue and purchase those immediately.
Motion to recommend favorably.
Second.
A motion has been properly made in second to recommend number 20 favorably. All those in favor? Anyone opposed? It carries. 21, sir.
Thank you, Chief.
Thank you, Chief. Resolved, whereas the residents of the city deserve full disclosure about significant issues in the school department which are impacting the city, operational activities, and our financial stability, even after the audit and investigation recently published. Now therefore be it resolved, City Solicitor Megan Bridges and Chief Financial Officer Troy Clarkson be invited to appear before the Finance Committee of the City Council to present information on legal and financial matters relating to the public schools. Invited, City Solicitor Megan Bridges, Chief Financial Officer Troy Clarkson.
Council Powell, I believe we said we were going to postpone this,
Yes,
right?
I had a meeting with Solicitor Bridges and Dr. Clarkson this morning. There is a lot of information we're putting together. I have not completed it as yet. That's on my end, so I would ask that this go over to a FinCom in December, and I think we should be able to coordinate between now and then. So motion to postpone to a Finance Committee meeting in December.
Second.
Motion to postpone 21 to a future FinCom. All those in favor of its postponement? Anyone opposed? Postpone it until December.
Thank you.
Number 22 we did. Number 23, sir.
23, resolved, whereas Signature Healthcare Brockton Hospital provides a critical link between medical care for city residents and those in other communities, and whereas it's important to receive an update on the progress towards reopening of the hospital, especially given the financial challenges reported by Stewart Health Group. Now therefore be it resolved that Fire Chief Brian Nardelli and other staff whom he may designate, a representative from the Administrator's Office of Signature Healthcare Brockton Hospital, and Building Commissioner James Plouffe appear at a meeting of the City Council to discuss progress and issues pertaining to restoration of full hospital services.
Mr. Chairman, at the time this was filed many weeks ago, we did not know the status of Brockton Hospital opening. It is now a moot issue, so I would move that this be tabled.
Second.
A motion has been properly made in second to table number 23. All those in favor of its tabling? All those opposed? To the table it shall go.
Item 24, resolved to have Superintendent of Schools, Dr. Priya Tahiliani, appear before a committee of the Brockton City Council to discuss the methods and policies of the Brockton School Department regarding query checks on employees that may have direct contact with the students of the Brockton schools. Invited Superintendent of Schools, Dr. Priya Tahiliani, and any staff members as needed.
Dr. Tahiliani, our apologies for the late hours, but you know how things are. We didn't have a FinCom earlier in the month, so this is why this agenda is a little longer. So my apologies.
No worries.
Sure. Well, let it. I think you're going to make a presentation, from what I understand, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Very loud.
And then we'll go into some questions. I believe that was your.
It was, Mr. President.
I think once your radio pop up on the little screens here or something.
Some realty.
It's on the screens.
Oh, wonderful.
Good. We all have one of these little gizmos. So.
Wonderful. Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for having me here this evening. So I'm going to start with a presentation on the quarries. So the school committee approved 2 policies to ensure that the district is in compliance with background check laws. The first is the criminal offender record information, also known as the QORI. A QORI check is conducted for all employees prior to hire and then district-wide every 3 years. All volunteers who might have unmonitored access to students are required to complete a QORI. There is no cost to individuals to complete a QORI check. Regarding fingerprints, these are also required for all employees and student teachers. There is a cost incurred by the individual for fingerprints. The cost is $55 for those with the DESE educator license and $35 for those without a DESE license. All employees are required to provide a new employee packet, and that has their Corey form in it. So you will see a copy of the Corey form that is used by our district. It must be verified by a BPS employee or notarized by a notary. The Corey is then processed by HR, and the results are maintained on a secure database within the HR department. New employees cannot be entered into the Munis system without a processed Corey. HR conducts pre-employment background checks and Corey checks on all non-employees who might have unmonitored access to students. Excuse me. So every 3 years, the HR department conducts the system-wide Corey. Each school receives a list of staff and returns the completed Corey forms to HR for processing. HR tracks down any missing forms in the event that a staff member, for example, in the case that maybe someone is on leave, to ensure that every single BPS employee has a new Corey background check every 3 years, even if they already completed one that year as per, thank you, the new employee paperwork or packet. If a result is found on a Corey background check, the individual receives a memo asking the person to come to the HR office with identification to retrieve a copy of the results. Decisions about employment are made on a case-by-case basis, obviously based on what specifically is found in the Corey. So the HR Access database is secured and updated as new Corys are processed. District administrators have access to the P drive, which lists only the names of those who are Corey approved. So it doesn't list their results, just their names. No Corey results are actually available to anyone outside of the HR staff. The next system-wide Corey will take place prior to January of 2026 to ensure that all employees have a current Corey check before their expiration in 3 years. And finally, there are a few areas that we could be doing better on ensuring and tracking Corys, and those are the ones that are for our vendors or consulting services. So there are some departments that already have this process down pat, such as the facilities department, but we recently have identified a few areas where we want to build in some additional checks and balances. So for example, reminding principals to always check the P drive when hiring private vendors. Also, HR will be provided with a weekly list of consultants from the grants department, as well as a weekly list of POs from finance to double check that all of the approved Corys have been done. So at this point in time, we do not believe that anyone is being missed, but we think it makes sense to put these systems into place just to be sure. And that brings me to the end of the presentation on Corys.
Councilor Griffin, that was your filing.
It was. Thank you, Doctor. Welcome. That was a very good presentation. I'm very pleased to see it is being carried out in a very thorough manner. I did receive some calls based on the audit report saying that some of the people hadn't been Corey certified. That's the reason I had you come in tonight. The part that you're working on with the vendors, what are the actual issues you're having with that side of it?
So we're not actually having any issues. It's just that it's not tracked in the employee database the same way. And so it's just about making sure we have a tracking system where everything is housed in one place. And right now that exists for employees, and while those processes are built in place, and for example, if you have a letter of agreement or a grant with a consultant, oftentimes it requires that they have Corey checks done. So while those safeguards exist, again, just because it is such a large system and there are so many people working in it, and because, this has been cited as an area of growth in the past, we just want to make sure that we're being extra vigilant.
It appears you are. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Councilor Griffin. Councilor Farwell and then Thompson.
Just a couple of quick questions. The school committee knows that they also have access to Corey, correct? They can see a Corey report on someone. No. It's specifically in Chapter 71, Section 38R, and it says that said school committee, superintendent, or principal or other administrator shall also have access to and may obtain all criminal offender record information for any subcontractor or laborer commissioned by the school committee or school or employed by the city or town to perform work on school grounds who may have direct and unmonitored contact with children. And I just want to make sure that the school committee does have that authority, so some of the responsibility is theirs. Doctor, tell me a little bit about the sped van drivers, and then I'll tell you why I'm asking in a minute.
So yes, so as part of their letters of agreement, they are required to have Corey checks.
Okay.
So we're supposed to have they're supposed to have a Corey on file.
Okay, well, this is only because people called me. On November 13th, at 3:19 in the afternoon, there was an incident at the Baker School where apparently two vans collided.
Correct.
And the police responded, and they arrested one driver, I believe, on a warrant. The driver lived in Stoughton, and I believe the other driver did not have a valid driver's license. So how often do we track driver license status?
So we do track driver license status for that specific instance. I think I'm allowed to speak to this. We have addressed that because there was also a situation that was not allowed to occur in that situation where there was a substitute driver that we were unaware of. So we have since severed ties with that particular provider because they were violating the agreement that we had with them. So yes, that was a specific situation where we did find that it was that perhaps the person had been quarried, but again, we have another provision that requires that they do not have substitutes, or they do not have substitutes that have not been approved by us. And that was a situation in which case, unfortunately, they did.
So would we do a driver's license check, obviously, more often than 3 years, correct?
Yes,
Annually,
yes.
or?
So I actually don't know exactly. I know I was in the training where the transportation director was talking about how often they do it. They do it, I believe, every year before the start of the year. And then they are, I believe, but I can also get you that information because I want to make sure I'm giving you the right information, but I also know that they are required if there's any status change in their driver's license to inform us.
Okay. Well, it sounds like you're, among the other things that you're wrestling with, it sounds like you're aware that we have to pay attention to detail to this because it's embarrassing and it's too bad. But I thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Councilor Duran.
Yeah, good evening. Thank you for coming, Superintendent. Based on what Council Farrell just asked you, obviously, someone can lose their license at any given time for speeding, for whatever reason that might be. So, obviously, I know you just got this job and, giving the history of the transportation company, I'm assuming we'll talk about it later on. It can be very complex. Obviously, in this particular situation, right, the liability is on the city. I don't want to speak about this, given the fact that it was an accident, and I don't know, what's going to happen. But my problem, based on what you stated, without this incident, we wouldn't know that these particular people did not have authorization to operate a car legally. So with that being said, the question is, I wonder how many people, obviously it's not you, how many vendors that we have actually transporting our kids who may not even have a license. So here's what I would recommend. And obviously I see some of the school committee here tonight. Obviously the transportation person is not here, which is very interesting.
Respectfully, I wanted to attend tonight.
Excellent. So what I would like to see is that, given this incident, which is less than a month, I would like to see you guys going through and asking these drivers to provide an update on the license. Because how do we know that we don't have more people like this on the road? And if facing a situation where it's very complex, whomever is going to claim that, well, if the school department let X, Y, and Z drives without a legal license, so they don't care. And I don't want to see this. I think we've been going through so much, and especially with the transportation department. I think by virtue of this incident, it opens the door for you to, how do I put this? asking the toughest questions to find out what's going on. Because as we speak, that's your job. Even though we have somebody in charge of that department, but you are still the boss. And with that being said, it is important, if not, it is paramount, that we do our due diligence, making sure that whomever has that access is in compliance, not just with their vendors, but also with the city. Because unless you have access to it, even by virtue of you asking that question can bring some kind of anxiety. And if somebody is not correct, they're probably going to just resign or quit the job or don't drive anymore. And I think that's necessary. Why am I putting a lot of emphasis into this? Because we have an example. 2 people, obviously, fortunately, there was no kids in the car, did not have the proper documents to operate a car. And I don't want to see this again. I don't want to hear the excuse, none of that. And I would greatly appreciate if you can actually look into this. And I'm assuming this council will back you up if you challenge them, because they have a legal obligation to have an authorized driver's license to drive in the state. You cannot just, put children in a car without a driver's license. You cannot put the city, at risk by virtue of your negligence. And another question for you: what are the consequences for a vendors if something like this happened? I'm assuming your office, maybe you are not at the liberty to comment on it tonight given the incident that happened. I would hope that there are consequences, probably termination of that vendor, regardless who that person might be, to saying that, hey man, listen, we have evidence to justify your drivers are not, driving according to the law. And I would hope that in their contract, this is something that is stated, whereby there will be no lawsuit against the school department saying that you cannot terminate me like this by virtue of having my drivers not licensed. This is something that I would like to see. And I think it's a first meeting, and we have another thing on the book. I'll ask more questions, but for that particular incident, I would hope that you give us an update in terms of some of the actions that we'll be taking after tonight to determine whether or not these people are legally and authorized to drive on our street and transporting our kids. I will leave it there, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor. Anyone else? Councillor Thomas.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And good evening, Madam Superintendent, and welcome to the council chamber. So it's a pleasure having you here tonight. On the Corey matter, is my understanding that is that Corey check also applicable to the members of this council? We often visit the schools and participate in different activities. We are front-facing to a lot of students, and so I'm just wondering: is it my understanding is correct that it also applies to us?
It applies to anybody who could be in a school building that may have any kind of unmonitored access to students. And so we do have to, be vigilant and just assume that anybody who might be in a building visiting or walking around could potentially go to the bathroom or have some sort of unmonitored access to students. That being said, when we have events or when we invite members to events, that wouldn't necessarily trigger a query. But if, for example, yes, a member reached out and said that they would like to maybe go on a visit with the principal, that it does make sense to have done a query or to have a query on file.
Okay, so I appreciate you guys making your own policy. I just want to follow the rules. You have every right to make the policies that you see fit for your department. So can you make it easy for us somehow to, I've never really filled out, I've done it for other people, but if, could you establish a process that we could then participate in to provide our query, so we can do that as soon as possible, so that there are many events listed on the calendar, and I just want to be able to participate and not be excluded because I don't have a query on file, and so maybe if you could reach out to our clerk or our council president, establish a process so that we can meet that obligation.
Absolutely. It's a pretty simple form that I can send along and that can be processed by our HR. It takes about 30 seconds to process, so we can absolutely do that.
Great. I appreciate that.
With the records of the councilor, though, I'm not exactly sure it's going to be 30 seconds.
Yeah.
Councilor Durante.
Yeah, let me just, I want to speak on this.
You're done?
Yes, I'm.
Hold on a second, let's go back to you again.
No, that was my only question. I just wanted to confirm that the council was applicable, was applicable to the council, and then what is the procedure for us to provide our quarries?
We should lead by example. I think it's an awesome suggestion that we should all follow.
Definitely.
Go ahead, sir.
Yeah, I mean, let me just put it to you like this. So I do not have any problem with that particular decision, but here's the problem that I have. In regard to the history, right, based on, what has been happening in the past in terms of us, and I'll say this, I'll take the liberty to say it. We are elected official. Like, we represent the city of Brockton. And obviously, some of, the school committee, they represent wards. But some of our council, too, they represent ward. But some of us represent the entire city. Among them, I'm one of those. I find it very problematic as elected official representing this entire city that in order for us to go to an event over there, that we have to provide a quarry. For me, this is just crazy. I mean, let me just put it to you like this. I understand that we have to making sure that our students are being protected. I also believe that we got to making sure that we don't invite anyone, but we should have some kind of credibility. And this is something that just because it hasn't done before doesn't mean you cannot do it right now. But this is something that was never done before, and we do not have at least one incident whereby the elected official, the city council, visiting any school, that there was an incident. And I'll tell you this. I'll speak for myself. I usually get invitation to go and speak to the schools, especially as a multilingual person. I usually get an invitation to go. So with that being said, I believe that some of these principals will be somewhat afraid to do that, because in order for them to do something like this, they would have to ask me to provide this document. And if I choose not to do so, then I cannot go and speak with those kids. And also, too, do the school committee have to provide a quarry to be on that compound? And if so, by virtue of them being also elected, obviously they are there. So obviously when they have meeting at Brockton High School, so there will be no need for that, or there will be a need for that, because technically they are on that compound, and they can have students going on back and forth after school programs. So is this something that you have a specific time for people to access it, or is it something that you generalize saying that anybody who wants to go there or at any school in Brockton, that they have to provide this document? Because I'm confused by it.
So as I mentioned before, there are some scenarios where that would be waived if we're inviting you for an event. If it's a graduation, if we're inviting you as a guest speaker, that would not be necessarily an event that, we would think triggered a quarry. I do like the counselor's idea of having quarries on file, just because I think it's a good practice. My understanding, I don't know what was implemented in the past, but my understanding is that this policy did already exist. It was just a different number of hours that were required. It is a pretty typical policy. I know it existed in my last district. Again, it's just about being vigilant for our students. I don't think it's meant to be a sign of disrespect to any elected officials or to undermine your stature in the community. I think it really is just about, being vigilant towards our students, kind of like what you were mentioning before about just going that extra step, making sure, everybody has everything that they need. I agree with you. I do think we need to be doing that more in all different scenarios, because you're right, maybe there hasn't been an event yet, but that's what we're trying to solve for. That's what we're trying to prevent against.
Yeah, but let me just say to you like this, though. It's like, as elected official, obviously by virtue of protocol, there's a process of sending invitation. But I'll be honest with you, though, I don't think I would need an invitation from you or anybody to go to a graduation there. Because as an elected official, I think that I can go there. Because, and I'll be, not just, but I'm speaking as an elected official. By virtue of protocol, if you so desire, you can choose to send a formal invitation to the president, the clerk, or each one of us. But if I choose, if you don't send me an invitation, that doesn't mean I cannot go to any public event. And not only that, let me just say this to you though. We fund the school. The money that you will be authorized to spend comes from here. Obviously, you got money from the state, but a portion of that money comes from the city council. We vote on that. So without our, how do I put this, collective action to pass the budget, there's no money there. So how do we have an obligation to vote on the budget, making sure that you have the money that you need to run the school system, and we need an invitation from you by virtue of that policy, which I believe some of these people that come up with it, it is being done intentionally, and I couldn't wait to talk about it, that we have to wait on whether or not we've been authorized to go to the school that the taxpayer money are funding. Let me finish. Let me finish. What is so frustrating about this is the fact that this is not a campaign. Obviously, you just got this job. We run for office in this city. We are public people. Our faces are public. We are out there. We cannot hide. Don't get me wrong. Some of us may have something. I'm not against the Corey. But what I'm against is the fact that if X, Y, and Z, for whatever reason, chooses not to approve that authorization, we cannot go. I think this is unacceptable. Go ahead.
So I think I understand your first point about not receiving a public, like a formal invitation, because, for example, we have an event at a school tomorrow that is kind of open to the public. And so, yes, you're right. I think that would be a situation that would not trigger a query. We have opened it, right, to the public. So it does say in the policy that it can be waived at any time. So all you need to do is reach out to me and I could certainly waive it. I completely understand what you're saying about the budget. However, I would say that that same thinking applies to, a resident who's a taxpayer who goes on a field trip. They still have to get a query, right? And they contribute to the schools, they contribute taxes. I understand what you're saying there, but I think there's a collective responsibility here, and that we're all responsible for this money, we're all responsible for the schools, we're all responsible for that safety. And so I think it's just about, again, making sure we're building these safeguards in place to prevent against a worst-case scenario.
But I think, though, with all due respect, I am also a taxpayer. I am also a resident.
Oh, correct, but
I might be elected. I mean, you said it. I'm just going to repeat what you just said. I might be an elected official, or we might be elected official, but we are taxpayer and we are resident. And to go further, does the mayor has to provide a query to go there?
So the school committee members are queried, yes.
No, the question was specific. Does the mayor, whomever that person might be, does the mayor will have to provide a query? And as we speak, does the mayor has a query in the book, giving him? Let me just talk to her. I don't think I need a backup. I think I'll talk to the person in charge. I don't need none of you to echo, none of that.
All right.
So with that being said, as a resident, as a taxpayer, and also as an elected official, and giving my time frame in the city, I have never seen something like this. And we do not have a history of having any incident whereby an elected official had engaged past tense in any kind of behavior that will trigger that. Because for me personally, matter of fact, I was supposed to join Council Lally at an event. Unfortunately, I couldn't do it. I wanted to challenge it because I wanted to go to the West Middle School to bring donuts and see what was going to happen, whether or not they were going to call the police on me. And obviously, I know we would have to put the superintendent, not the superintendent, the principal, how do I put this, in danger because she could say, hey man, we're not gonna let you in. Because in the past, I personally have been going through a lot of school, either to read for the kids, to speak, and all of that. And usually, they would send me an email, and I don't see it, and I saw it last minute. So with that being said, I would have to cancel that and tell them, hey, listen, as much as I would like to come to this school to speak to these kids, unfortunately, I cannot because I haven't done my CORI. What kind of nonsense is this? I just don't get it. Because, and I'll tell you this, by virtue of my job, I have a CORI. That's a job that I have to go there and give it and do all of that. But I don't really see how an elected official, here we are, our face is everywhere, our name is everywhere, that we would have to have your authorization in order for us to visit the school that we are funding. And you know what's so funny? I think it's going to be very interesting next year when it's come down to the budget. And I'm sorry if I'm coming to you like this. I know you just got this job. I know you haven't been here for that long. And I know there's a lot. And I know I probably assume some of the advices that you are getting. It's going to be very interesting coming next year during the budget time about this. With that being said, Mr. Chairman, thank you.
As someone who came from child protection, I worked at the Archdiocese of Boston for a number of years protecting kids. I welcome CORI. I think it should be, something that we ought to pride ourselves that the entire city government does this, and we have absolutely nothing to hide. We should lead by example. That being said, can I get a motion so that we can move this forward?
Motion to recommend favorably.
Oh, you wanted to say on the
motion?
We'll second it before you can say on
Second.
the motion.
On the motion. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening. I just wanted to, thank you again. I think this is the first time you've come in front of us, so I want to say, thank you for reaching out when you arrived. I took the opportunity to have a good sit down with you. I think that was very productive. I appreciate your time. And obviously, thank you for coming in. And thank you for your forthcomingness and the information regarding the situation with those van drivers at the Baker, because that was definitely something interesting to hear about. Really, the only thing I have before we move from this item is just a request that the department, once the department cracks down further on those independent van drivers and the substitutions they might be having, that these results be shared both with the council and with the general public, just so people know, or not like the individual CORI results, but just like, hey, we found this many people that are lacking, these are going to be fired, these are going to be remediated. We don't need to know if, a certain driver has a certain background, but I think the public and the council would appreciate knowing, a 30,000-foot view of the situation with the CORIs at the end of it.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, just a request for information from the superintendent. At some point within the next week or 10 days, would you provide to us a list of those communities where the school committee requires elected officials to provide 3 days' notice before reporting to a public school unless they get a waiver from the chief elected official or the superintendent in that district? That's number one. Number two, did I hear you correctly that in Everett, you did require the city councilors to submit CORI in order to visit a school?
We had a policy whereby, yes, you had to, anybody, again, who would come into a school if you weren't invited, and maybe this was just a practice, but I don't know about the 72 hours. I will say that. It was typically more like 24, 48 hours, but we did have a policy whereby, yes, I don't think it's specific to elected officials. It was anybody who came to visit.
All right, and then the last observation is a father decides that he wants to go in and talk to A teacher or the principal at a school. You don't have a query on that person?
No.
They're allowed to go in and they're allowed to talk with the principal, might even have to use the restroom without someone following them in. That's not a problem, but if we go there, it is.
I think it's, again, more about the scenario. Is there a chance where, yes, you could have, now, when parents come in for meetings, it is more monitored. They are engaging with an administrator or a teacher, and
But
then...
that's, they can go in without a query.
Correct, but my understanding for what we're asking for, or what has been done in the past maybe, was if a city councilor wanted to come in and just kind of walk around.
Yeah.
And visit classes. We don't want to say that you can't do that, but that is a very different kind of visit than a parent coming in for a parent-teacher conference. So there is some discretion there, absolutely. I think parents, of course, who are coming in to meet with their teacher or their principal would not require a query, but parents who are coming to chaperone a field trip do, or who are, serving in a different capacity in a school would have to, so.
But counselors are parents and grandparents. So why can't a grandparent, or why can't a parent who happens to be a city councilor have the same right to go to a school without notice and without a query in order to engage in a conversation with a staff member, or maybe attend the child's class? It might be, this is bring dad to work, bring dad to school and have them describe their job?
I think it, again, depends on the capacity in which you're coming in. If you're coming in as a grandparent who's speaking to the teacher, or a grandparent who's visiting the administrator, absolutely. Again, if you're being invited in for a career day, we're not asking for a query. I think, the situation does matter, and it does require us to use our best judgment.
Well, the sad part about it is it looks like you want the 3 days' notice because you want to prepare everyone that an elected official is coming in, and let's make sure everything is shipshape, let's make sure everything is as it should be. That is the perception that this new policy gives. And I will tell you, having spent 14 years on the school committee, 10 as a member and 4 as chair, this never occurred. It was never a problem. The school committee never had this policy. As a matter of fact, we welcomed public officials coming in to observe what goes on in the school, to understand the importance of funding, maybe to see areas where more funding is needed. So, this committee can do as it sees fit. I can just give you my observations, and you can query me every week if you want to, but I do think restricting public officials, duly elected public officials, from visiting a school without giving advance notice or requesting a waiver from you or the mayor is it just borders on the absurd, but we'll let the public decide. That's the wonderful thing about democracy. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, sir. Lastly,
Thank you, Mr. President. I actually concur with this Corey policy, to have it done once a year. Again, we're here to protect the children, and elected official is one thing, but there's a lot of elected officials who are in the Federal Bureau of Prisons. So no one's exempt. As long as it's done right across the board, I don't think it's a problem at all. If you could provide us a Corey sheet each year, I'd be glad to fill it out and make it easy going into the schools and cover everybody. So I think this is something that we can address without a lot of problems, quite frankly. Again, I want to thank you again for coming in tonight. Thank you, Mr. President.
would you like, we
Yeah,
are.
was there a motion on the table already, right? Yeah.
So a motion has been properly made in second to recommend 24 favorably. All those in favor? Anyone opposed? It carries. Before we go on, I just want to acknowledge our colleagues in government, School Committee Vice Chair Rodriguez, Oliver, Azak, Vega, and Gomes. Gomes, always late, but at least he showed up. Number 25, sir.
Item 25, resolved, be it resolved by the Brockton City Council to invite Troy Clarkson, Chief Financial Officer, Dr. Priya Tahiliani, Superintendent of the School Department, and Jennifer Perez, Director of Transportation for Brockton Public Schools, to appear before the Finance Committee to discuss and provide an update on the current status of the transportation budget and general update for the Transportation Department. Invited Chief Financial Officer Troy Clarkson, Superintendent Dr. Priya Tahiliani, Director of Transportation Jennifer Perez.
Doctor, I too agree with you that the buck stops with the superintendent, and you should be the answeree for all that is school department related, so.
Mr. Chairman?
Yeah, I appreciate that.
This is Councilor Minicello's resolve, and he is not here. And I, out of respect to our colleague, and I know it's late, and I appreciate the fact the superintendent's been here, but I really think this should be kicked over to the next FinCom.
Oh, yeah, but she's here. If she has a presentation to make, let her make a presentation, then we can kick it to when he comes back.
He won't hear it, but that's all right.
Yeah. Go ahead, ma'am.
All right, thank you. I just finished 4 months here. I'm honored to be here and be serving here in Brockton, and to be diving into some of these concerns that we have as a city. And transportation has obviously been one of the first things on my list to dive into. It was hard to decide what to present because there is so much information, but if it looks like I'm going to be here for a subsequent presentation, I'm happy to provide more information. And perhaps this will give you all an opportunity to ask specific clarifying questions, and I can provide and bring more information next time. But I actually wanted to start with just a quick look back at the transportation plan that was presented back on December 9th of 2020 with what actual costs look like in FY24. So I just kind of wanted to ground us. Again, a lot of what I've been doing is trying to fact find into sort of how we got here, not for the purposes of blaming, but again, for the purposes of ensuring that we have a smart path forward, or if there were plans that were laid out previously that we have not been implementing with fidelity, that we do that, because perhaps that's part of where some of the issues are lying. So that is why I present this slide. So on this slide, we'll see some of the projections that were made in just some of the categories of spending back in 2020, when Brockton was considering whether or not to bring in transportation. And so some of these include the cost of mechanics, bus lease, fuel, and maintenance. So you'll see that in the first column. The next column is the actual cost for FY24, just to give you an idea of how these compare. So as you will see, the variances are pretty significant, and they total up to $4.7 million that wasn't originally accounted for. Unfortunately, one thing that I was not able to really drill down into, and I have been looking back at your meetings, at the materials that you had at the school committee meetings, I've watched them, but one thing I was kind of missing, which then makes it hard to kind of ground these numbers, is the calculations behind the numbers that were originally presented when y'all were projecting out. So the only one I was actually able to find was the bus maintenance, which is here for $44,450. That calculation was clear to me. It was allotted $350 for maintenance per bus for 127 buses for that year, which I don't know about you guys, but I've spent more than that on maintaining my Nissan Juke. Maybe that's because I drive a Nissan Juke, but I don't know. But so it seems somewhat low. That being said, if you even look at the actuals, I would have even thought the actuals were kind of low. At $66,497. And I bring this up again just to kind of say that we're still trying to figure out the methodology here, and there's a lot of research and legwork to still be done. I also want to bring up that the $66K that's here for bus maintenance doesn't fully account for the total expense, as I know there were some private vendors that were used to do some maintenance last year, and there was some equipment bought that is not encapsulated in this $66,000. And as you all know, it's no secret that one of the things that the school department is working on is better historical budgets and making sure that we accurately capture these costs, because when we are looking at, these are the raw numbers that you're looking at, but when we do look at our numbers, we do have to kind of consider those things of, wait, where are there other costs that were expended that maybe are not captured in this number that we have. And so my goal for the school department is that we are going to have much more accurate and drilled down numbers moving forward in a budget. So I did want to let you know, I'm sure you're already aware, but because y'all have been asking for a while for a transportation audit, so we have gotten the initial findings of the audit from TAS, and this shows right here sort of the methodology, the interviews that were conducted, as well as the documents that were looked into that included enrollment figures, policies and procedures, job descriptions, et cetera. I was able to speak to TAS last week, and they said that we would be receiving the revised or final audit by the end of this week, which I'm looking forward to because it will include 2 key points that we wanted in the audit, which are a cost analysis, so basically looking into whether it makes sense to keep it in-house, go out, or some hybrid, but also it will have the RFPs in it as well. So just to go through some of the initial findings of the TAS audit, and the reason I do want to bring these up is because they do all, unfortunately, add up to numbers. They add up to costs. So for example, one area of difficulty that TAS identified was the facility space currently dedicated to transportation. So our current infrastructure does not meet our existing demands in a variety of ways, one being the lack of on-site fueling, which I guess is, I don't know if it's an industry standard, but it's certainly preferred because it leads to less costs, but also limited space for maintenance, which results in delays in maintenance and, again, additional labor costs. TAS also noted a lack of training space for drivers, as well as general lack of space to accommodate and support our team of drivers. The existing space also lacks storage for equipment and supplies. We're currently significantly understaffed on the maintenance side of the transportation operation, though TAS did make note that the mechanics we have are doing an excellent job in spite of those challenges, but they recommended a ratio of 1 mechanic for every 15 to 18 buses, while we're currently operating with 3 mechanics for every 47 buses. And back on that original projection slide, we had originally projected that it would cost $65,000 for mechanics. We're currently spending $98,000 for mechanics, so that gives you an idea of if we were to, multiply that by 5, that would be obviously an increased expenditure. As it is, we are putting a lot of work on a few individuals, and that workload is expected to increase as well as our relatively new fleet becomes older. So having more mechanics would ultimately allow us to minimize disruptions caused by buses going out for service repairs. But again, if you look back at the projections, there was an increased cost year over year that was projected because we anticipated that maintenance would go up as the buses got older. So regarding the financial aspects of the transportation department, TAS observed that BPS is spending too much on outsourcing out-of-district runs, which I don't think comes as a surprise, and that covers everything from the special education placements to our school choice students. TAS did indicate that people directly responsible for our trips should have some internal budgetary control and responsibility, and that our current costs for outsourcing are too high and straining the budget, but that, of course, outsourcing will ultimately only become more costly as time goes on, which was one of the main drivers for Brockton bringing transportation in-house, is because of the raising costs of outsourcing. So these expenses, again, could be better managed through regular review and renegotiation of outsourced transportation fees based on performance metrics. And one recommendation to help save on cost was to look at modifying school start times, though that is a step that we'd obviously only take after a very thorough and thoughtful review of the impacts that it would have on our students and families, but also that would require a good amount of community input as well. So as I mentioned, the fleet itself is growing older. The fleet is comprised of 65 vans, 8 wheelchair buses, 6 minivans, and 62 large buses. We do lack spare buses, which again causes inefficiencies when we have unexpected maintenance issues that do arise. We also are without a bus replacement plan, which they certainly cited as an issue in order to mitigate the impact of aging fleet. TAS did recommend that we develop and implement a plan for fleet replacement so that we can ensure that we are self-sufficient in maintaining our fleet. Some of the things we'd also need to consider in building out the plan are vehicle age, cost to maintain, the fleet's ability to meet needs, and what our options may be for trading in older models for new models. We do currently own our whole fleet, but TAS recommends leasing buses going forward for budgetary reasons, including predictable monthly payments, as well as the potential to include some of those maintenance costs in the lease agreements. From a labor standpoint, TAS does encourage us prioritizing mutually beneficial terms in our future collective bargaining agreements, which would include attendance incentives to reduce drivers calling out of work, which obviously makes it very challenging to cover routes. Also looking at clarifying and codifying the trip selection process so that it's more transparent and fair. And finally, clarifying our processes and procedures that would help us operate more efficiently and avoid potential misunderstandings amongst staff, as well as grievances that may be filed by members. From a management perspective, the recommendations centered around increasing staffing to support efficiency, citing again the need for more mechanics, but also for more administrative support and a more defined reporting structure to increase oversight and management. Communication was also outlined as an area where we have the opportunity to grow, with TAS encouraging annual meetings amongst transportation staff, building leaders, and key district leaders overseeing special education and athletics. One key area TAS also identified as needing improvement is our routing process, which is created by a routing software, as well as the clarified trip selection process that I mentioned previously. TAS identified the need for more formal accountability procedures in place in the form of clear roles and expectations, clear communication, and a better defined process for out-of-district runs. Excuse me. And finally, on the routing issue, we do have a routing software called Versatrans, which TAS did approve of and said is a great software to have, but we need to be leveraging it better. So TAS also recommended conducting audits of ridership at least 3 times per year to see where our needs are and what might make sense in terms of consolidating those routes with lower ridership. Another item for us to look at is regional partnerships for out-of-district runs and seeing where there might be options to collaborate in neighboring districts to make these more efficient and cost-effective. So looking at routing inside the district, there's also room to incorporate more driver feedback into that process, as well as known best practices we can implement, like reducing turnaround points and decreasing student time spent on the bus. Finally, we are encouraged by TAS to be a bit more creative from one year to the next in designing our routes rather than doing what we do currently, which is keeping routes fundamentally the same year over year with minor changes. This is something we've already started to try to look at doing, especially as we've had so many newcomers coming into the district that we have had to add bus routes. So we're trying to go ahead and workshop what that process looks like even now to be more creative with how we're routing students. So just to give you an idea of the number of students that are transported and the various ways that they're transported, you see on this chart that the majority of our students are riding our yellow buses or our big buses. We also have a significant number of students who are on door-to-door within the district, as is required by their IEP. We also have a large number of students who we transport to New Heights Charter School, as we are required to by the state, as well as students covered by McKinney-Vento. It's important to note again that, as I was mentioning, these are the actual numbers as of today, and these numbers have increased by 153 students since the start of the school year, 109 of whom are covered by McKinney-Vento, and another 44 who fall under the other various categories. So here you'll see our projected budget, which totals $19.3 million for this school year at this time, and where those expenditures are by category. Obviously, our largest costs are in our driver salaries, in out-of-district, in-district, McKinney-Vento, fuel, and the rent for the fairgrounds. but you'll see all of the different categories where that are in our budget for the transportation department here. This is just a different cut of that same data, so you can see by percentage where our largest cost drivers are. And so you can see that, again, the majority of our costs are in our driver salaries out of district, in district, and McKinney-Vento. Private transportation costs have obviously been a topic of conversation, as that is the way we transport our students who are on door-to-door out of district and on McKinney-Vento. We do have a small portion of money that actually goes to private transportation for our general education students as well, which is sometimes required because of field trips that are happening during the time of our regular runs, or on those occasions where we require sub-coverage for drivers that are out. We generally try to reroute other drivers to pick up the route afterwards, but there have been some cases where we have to have private transportation transport those students. So here on this slide, you'll see how much money we have expended already this year on our private transportation costs, and it totals $1.3 million. Here you can see where we are right now as far as our expenditures, which are in gray, as compared to the money we have allotted, which is in red. So for example, we've allotted $8 million for driver salaries, as you saw on the previous slide, and at this point we have expended $2 million of it. So there are a lot of areas for growth here in our transportation department. Some of the ways that we have been working on improving our processes, and again, I presented a lot of this at school committee, so I apologize if this is redundant. But even in those 2 weeks, we have been able to move some items from the ongoing category into the completed section. For example, we've created a fueling schedule that allows us to better leverage the low costs of the DPW, while also obtaining state-issued fuel cards, as it did come to our attention that we had not gone out for an appropriate procurement for fueling in the last 3 years. So now we have the state-issued fueling cards, and we're working with DPW, which alleviates that very large issue. One area that requires much greater attention is on how we track our transportation costs. So as you know from the audit and the investigation, again, one of the main issues that we are working with is in trying to project a budget based on a historical budget that may have some inaccuracies in it. And so, again, this means our projections are imperfect at this point, but we're doing our best to ensure that we're tracking accurately this year so that we can account for transportation costs better next year. And so, as I was mentioning before with like the maintenance costs, they are not all captured in one place as they should be, or they're not as easy to pull as they should be, but this is something we hope to fix in the future. And again, that's just one example of how we hope to be able to look more clearly at what our transportation costs are in the future. I do have some additional slides regarding our requirements for our private vendors. Corey's actually our safety protocols and trainings, but I will provide this slide deck to all of you, and it sounds like we may have a subsequent meeting. So you'll have an opportunity to look over it and send me any questions ahead of time so that I can compile any data that you might need. And I'm also happy to go through those slides tonight too, if you would like me to, of course. But what I did want to at least capture this evening is that we are looking forward to getting the full audit with the cost analysis for keeping transportation in-house or going back out by the end of this week. And so hopefully at the next presentation, I would have that information. We are also still doing research. Instead of just looking in-house at our historical budgets and costs, I have contacted districts like Worcester, who is similar size but also has their own in-house transportation, or Lynn, who doesn't have their own in-house but has a similar size district, to see what their comps are for transportation, just to give us an idea of what we should be spending, because they have similar costs to us when it comes to McKinney-Vento and increasing numbers of students coming in throughout the school year. So hopefully I'll have that information as well, just to give us, a gauge of what we should be looking at. But for now, what I can say is that transportation is a costly endeavor, and as we've seen, it's costly when it's in-house and it's costly when it's outsourced as well. And so one of the things that, I also want to look at, and if you have any more information for me, I know I asked for some of the counselors, if you have additional information or documents from the past when we were looking at some of those cost savings, because I know that in some of the presentations, there were cost savings that were cited, and I did look at a proposal, but I could not quite tell how they were being actualized over time. So again, that may be a place where we can figure out if there's a part of the plan that we missed, and we should be doing this with a greater fidelity. Now, again, like I said, given our best projections, which I wish were better, this year is going to cost us $19.3 million. Which is better than what I heard was projected in the past. I think I had heard something like 22 to 25 million. I don't know. Obviously, it's more than we can afford either way. But unfortunately, I want to make sure not to repeat past mistakes, and I want to be very transparent about what we're looking at with our budget. And I also want to condition expectations as well, because I don't see where, even with the cost-saving measures that we can put into place, how it's going to cut the additional $5 million that we would need to fully fund a $19.3 million expenditure in transportation. So one of the requests for support is I will be coming before you to request the allocation of the $6 million that I know y'all put aside from the stabilization account to fund transportation, but also just another consideration for you to have is that we do know that it's going to take at least an additional $5 million to fully fund transportation, and I know that, the city does not have that, and we are working not only with our consultant, but also we have been working with DESI, who also knows that projection, and has asked for monthly meetings to see how they can support us as well in problem solving for the remainder of this year. So with that, I'll take any questions.
All right, well, councilors, I just want to make sure I caution you all that we're going to focus our questions based on transportation. We're not here to discuss anything else other than just transportation. We can always come back and discuss other issues, but let's just stay focused on transportation. I think your presentation here is by far 1,000% better than it was the last time we discussed transportation and this particular thing. At least there was a hello and that kind of stuff, which made a big difference. Councilor Farwell, Thompson.
Just a request to Mr. Claxon. Once you have this PowerPoint presentation in the next couple of weeks, would you take a look at it, do some cost analysis, and come back to us with some real-world comments? I mean, I'm looking at it, and I'm just shaking my head. I don't, at least at this point, think it's realistic, but you have the staff and you have the wherewithal to do a deep dive into this. So in the next couple of weeks, just take a look at it and see where we are. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right, Councilor Thompson, Lorena Court, and Lally.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and again, good evening, Madam Superintendent. Appreciate the presentation. I watched it the first time for the school committee. This one seemed to have a little bit more information in it, so I do appreciate that. First thing, is there any way you can share that PowerPoint with the council?
Absolutely.
It's part of the public record as of tonight, so it'll be we'll have it on the city website, and I'll send it to you guys.
Okay, great. I appreciate that. That way we can kind of review it a little slower. So starting with the driver salary at 46% of the overall budget, is that normal? Is employee cost usually that high, or is there something we can do to kind of maybe renegotiate, or how long is the contract, and is there, do we put too much on the table that we may have to pull back a bit on in the future?
So I would say yes to all of those questions. So it is typical that salaries, and you see that, kind of anywhere in a school department when I present the budget, we always show that salaries are your largest cost driver, especially in education and clearly in transportation. But also to answer your question, yes, I do believe that there are ways that we could have some cost savings in our upcoming negotiations. One of the things that we are looking at, again, I want to see what the final audit says, but to negotiate an upcoming contract, because it does expire in June of 2025, we would only negotiate a one-year contract. And I have already met with the Teamsters and, the bus drivers, and interestingly, they are motivated to make this work. That's what I've heard from them in meeting with them, and so that means we're going to have to work together in order to do that. I mean, they recognize, and I'm sure they're watching this presentation, know that the situation that we're in and that it's not looking great at this point. And so I think we're all motivated, if we wanted to even try it for one more year, to see what we can do with a collective bargaining agreement. There are definitely areas, as you read the agreement, that certainly should be rewritten and will be revisited. Absolutely. And I think there are areas that even the Teamsters representative agrees that there are areas that we maybe could have done things differently in the past. So I think that there is a shared interest in moving forward in a way that's more fiscally responsible.
Okay, I appreciate that. I think, as you stated, the upcoming finalized audit is really going to be a pivot point on how we're going to move forward. And the fact that you reached out to other similar-sized school districts to kind of see what their costs are, I think that's, a smart thing to do. Now, I've always been, seeing from the prior school audit where it essentially said there was no real, it never went out to review, right? We were told that the whole school, the transportation department was approved by an outside consultant, that it was going to save us, I think, millions of dollars, $2, $3, $4 millions of dollars per year compared to our contractor pricing. And obviously we found in the audit that never happened. And so it's a complete disappointment that we're kind of sold a bill of goods. I'm hoping that we can make it work. I'm not sure, and that's why I look forward to the finalized audit to really give us, some indication of what the alternatives are. And maybe you're right. Maybe it does become some hybrid type of situation. And I'm looking forward to discussing that. But in the meantime, it's my understanding that we did enter into a new lease agreement with our current bus depot, and that's a 3-year contract. And so, and I believe in your school committee presentation, you said it went out to an RFP. The current depot, it was the most, competitive, and, we chose to move forward. But we've entered into a 3-year lease with a depot that really doesn't meet our needs. And so I know there are other alternatives out there. Potentially, you were talking about some 13 acres near the Davis School, but it's going to cost millions of dollars to get that up and running. And so, it was just money that we don't have. And so I just, ultimately we're stuck between a rock and a hard place right now. And so I'm trying to think of different ways that we could maybe potentially save money. And so 2 ideas, and it wasn't never discussed in the audit. And so I don't know if there are ideas that are even on the table right now. But it seems to me that there are a lot of school districts that actually charge for transportation costs. Is that on the table? I know it's not something that people like, it's a tough pill to swallow, but it could help. And so is it even up for discussion?
So at this point in time, we are transporting those students that we are legally required to transport. So I don't know how, I don't know where we could potentially leverage that, but we could certainly look into it.
All right. And secondly, what is our, I believe in past, we have a 2-mile requirement?
Yes, it's 1.5 miles at one grade level and then 2 miles at another grade level. So I think at the lower level is 7 to, or 6 to, I'm forgetting right now, but yeah, it's 1.5 miles or 2 miles. And I know that, for example, New Heights Charter School, I actually recently reached out to them to just make sure, because 600 and something students is a lot. I wondered if maybe there was some cost savings there, but it turns out that they are also, as per Mass General Law, we are required to cover their expenses, but using the same policy that we have ourselves. So they fall under the same policy, they are using the same mileage requirements. But again, I would need to look into whether or not charging is a possibility.
Okay. Now, that 1.5 for certain grade levels and the 2 miles for other grade levels, is that currently what the Brockton School District follows?
Yes.
Now, is that required by the state?
Yes.
So we couldn't expand that at all, or?
Well, that's what I'm actually unsure about, because like you mentioned, there are districts that do charge. So I need to figure out where that line is and how those school districts are doing it.
All right, so potentially we could maybe increase it. I mean, I know these aren't, favored ideas, but we're in a crisis right now. And so right now, this is kind of just brainstorming. Let's just throw it out there and see if it's possible. So potentially, would it be possible to go to 2 miles for those grade levels and 2.5 miles for the other grade levels? I don't know. And that's something I surely would like to know, to see if we have it within our power to do that. Maybe that could save us some money. I don't know.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, every option is on the table. I know some school districts also use their public transportation and provide cards. Like, there are definitely different things that we're going to be exploring to see if there's a way to save money.
Because at this point, there's no bad ideas. They may not eventually, be adopted, but this is the brainstorming time. Let's throw everything out there and let's see if potentially we could save some money, because I believe we have I'm trying to remember what our non-net was, and Ms. Troy, what was the non-net that we authorized this year?
The actual budget that you approved?
Correct. I just don't remember off the top of my head. I know we made a cut, but I'm just trying to remember how much, because, and just while you're looking at that, Madam Superintendent, looking at your presentation, I'm just confused about 2 numbers. It said $6 million allocation from the stabilization fund, but that you were going to seek $5 million. So was that $5 million from the 6 stabilization, or you're talking $11 million?
Yes, and I put consideration because I didn't want to say we're seeking it. I know that it was already planned that we would be seeking the $6 million. For my understanding is that the $6 million was put in stabilization for us to come before the city council, kind of explain what our state of transportation is and request that additional allocation. That was my understanding. However, in looking at a full projection for what the cost is, and I believe, again, it kind of sounds similar to some of these other items that, perhaps we had asked for a greater amount for transportation and weren't able to get it because it couldn't be fully funded, which is understandable. So that $5 million would be on top of that to get us to the 19.3.
Wow.
But what we're trying to do is figure out, and we have some ideas about some other ways we're going to have to cover those costs.
Okay.
I don't want to state anything at this moment in time.
Right.
But we recognize that the city is not in a position.
Right. So just for us to know that there's a potential that you would be seeking an $11 million supplemental budget.
Right. I didn't want to come before this body and not be honest about where we're seeing the projections.
Absolutely. We need to know these things, so we appreciate that. Wow. Okay. How often is this transportation roundtable meeting?
Every other week.
Okay. And do you believe the school department's benefiting from that roundtable? And just what are the topics being discussed? Is it transportation only, or are there other topics being discussed at that roundtable?
Yeah, we have several different meetings with the city. So that specific meeting includes both the city council president and our vice chair. So sometimes, we won't just stick with transportation. We will talk about transportation, but really anything to do with finances, because that's our opportunity to have both the city council president and the vice chair available. We have other meetings as well. We have a check-in with Open Architects every week that also includes the city. And so that meeting happens weekly as well, but those are not the ones that also include the vice chair and the city council president. So we do try to cover a range of topics, even though it's called the Transportation Roundtable. We do try to cover a range of topics.
Okay, and I'm glad that roundtable is in operation, and I know both on the school side and on the city side, we talked about a working group to try to work through some more financial issues. I'm hoping we can get that stood up as soon as possible, because I think we need to have those discussions. One of the things that the audit showed was that there was a wall built between the city side and the school side. We all have to work together to make sure that wall comes crashing down, and that there's full collaboration and communication between the city and the school department. It's so important that our children get a quality education, and it's so important that we, as the elected officials, work together to ensure that. And so I know we're all available for those discussions, and I'm sure this is going to be one of many times that we're going to meet over the school year to make sure that, we're all working together, and that we're all brainstorming and trying to meet this potential $11 million deficit, because at this point, I really don't know where it's going to come from. But I appreciate you coming before us tonight. Thank you for your presentation. Thank you for your candor. And thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Duranagor.
Just a point of information, the lease agreement for the bus depot has not been signed by the mayor. I just signed the order today so that it will be coming before the city council in the future. So that is not, as they say, a done deal, Councilor Thompson.
Thank you, Councilor Farrell. I appreciate that.
Councilor Duranagor.
I'm glad. Excellent point. And again, thank you for coming. This transportation company had cost the city a lot of headache. And I'm saying this to you because obviously sitting here watching the presentation, well done. The level of information that you have been sharing with us, I've never seen it before. And based on what you said, you've been watching some of these meetings, reviewing them to see some of the comments. And if you look deep, some of the comment that I made in the past, it's a lack of accountability and a level of ignorance that was based on whomever come up with those ideas by virtue of hiring some of these people, whereby they were unfit, unqualified to lead this department, which cost the city of Brockton a lot of money and put us on the news for multiple reasons. As the boss, and I'm saying this intentionally, obviously, I have watched the CFO coming in front of this council trying to save, obviously, the city, by virtue of coming and explaining the situation with this deficit, as you know, $18.25 million. So with that being said, I would hope that there's an open door in terms of collaboration from the school department and the CFO. Because at the end of the day, we are one city. We represent everyone in the city of Brockton. And the CFO, by law, has an obligation to watch the financial state of the city. And even though some people may not believe so, but there are law in the book for that. And these laws must be respected. And I hope that the CFO will take advantage of these laws by virtue of going after any way that the city is investing money. To go back to the transportation company, I would hope next year when we come in front of the city council, there's a different view, a different approach in terms of what's going on there. As you may have heard, we have a lot of waste in the past where we are paying people to transport our kids, and the service that we were paying for wasn't even there. And I guess one of the points that you made, which was excellent, is looking at how maybe we can lease these buses. Because some people may see this transportation department as an opportunity to make money. And to the chairman, and of course the gentleman from Ward 5, obviously he stated that, paying money. It's an excellent idea, but not in the city. Because the population that we are helping, a lot of these people I don't think will be able to afford it, even if it's $1. And I think it is upon us to making sure that we have the right leadership, whereby we take a look at every penny, every dollar that has been putting into this transportation department to be spent accordingly. Because in the past, this wasn't there. And to justify my point, you have the documents to prove it. And based on that presentation, I would hope that you would hold people accountable. I mean, I understand as the new boss, some people may not like some of your ideas. They may not view it as something that is effective. But whenever you are about to make a decision in terms of like either saving or find a different way to spend our taxpayer money, I would hope that you will take the tough route. Whether or not it is popular, at the end of the day, you will be the one throwing under the bus, I can tell you that. If anything goes down, you will be blamed for it. And with that being said, you were hired to do that. And you were hired to help us save money. And I would hope that you and the CFO and the leadership can work together to bring the best of what we want for our children. I believe we need transportation, but I am not convinced yet we have the ability to maintain it. And with your administration, the folks who are following you, I hope that we will have an opportunity to see that whether or not it is something important that should be there or something that we should think about either changing it. Because I am not looking forward to another deficit. I am not. And I know that there are so many people that I spoke to within the transportation department who have a lot of complaints about how this department, even as we speak, are being running. It seems like some of the problem that we have in the past with this transportation department are still there. And I would hope you can find a way to bring accountability, to bring respect, control spending to that department. I don't want to say too much to you because this is something that you are part of and you are not there, but you are the boss now. You are in charge now. We cannot go in the past saying that this happened under this person or that person. You will be the one that will be questioned by either the school committee or the council. You will be the one that will be questioned by anybody out there, whether or not the judgment that you use to help, if not control, what's going on within the school department was good. With that being said, I wish you nothing but the best. If I can support you in any way, I'll be more than happy to do so. But my number one job on this council is to represent the taxpayer in the city. And as long as I am here, I will ask the question that some people might think that are uncomfortable. I welcome your input. I welcome your judgment. By virtue of this presentation, I think we are in the right direction. And I would hope you will not take advice from anyone who may not have the best interest for the taxpayer of this city. With that being said, Mr. Chairman, thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Lally.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Tempted to say as a joke, good morning, but that might not be funny.
Where we're going, I think
that might not be funny in 50 minutes. Yeah. So just a couple of points from the presentation, which I do appreciate. Again, as my colleague said, that this is a lot more information than we have received in the past, which we do appreciate. One of the things that was listed, beneficial union agreements, which I understand is a euphemistic way to describe what we have right now. So I do look forward to seeing what can be resolved there. Leasing buses, yes. So that was something I think that, you know, the council at the time anticipated was going to be done. So, you know, finding out that they were bought and the gas buses over diesel were bought was something that, you know, made everyone just kind of, you know, make a bit of a face. I had a question about one of the numbers. They recommended that for the fleet, you would need about 15 to 20% of your fleet as a, like spares. Is that like a common practice? Is that, because that sounds like a lot, like how many buses are you planning on not functioning?
Right. And so I was very interested because I started to kind of go through the initial findings of the audit and try to do a cost analysis myself. You know, just like, okay, what would it cost to have 10 more mechanics? You know, because I know how much our mechanics cost. What would it cost? Because this is how much the buses cost. What would it cost to have 15 or 20%? And I'll be honest, in just adding up the numbers that I did have and not being an expert in the transportation field by any means, it adds up. It adds up quite quickly. So while that is their recommendation, I would say that right now I think we have 2, and I'm not saying that's a good idea either, but I feel like there must be some happy medium in between, you know, 2 and an additional 15 to 20% that would be manageable. And I would say the same about the mechanics as well. I mean, I don't think, I'll be honest, just as we all know how difficult it is to recruit and to hire and to retain staff, I look at a number of 15 mechanics and I'm not just thinking about, you know, how much that would cost. I'm thinking about how are we recruiting 15 mechanics and retain, like we know that a lot of our positions sit vacant a lot of the time. So we do have to plan for having less rather than more most of the time.
Yeah. And that is, I think, sort of my next point or note is I think that we have more than the 2 spares if we really dug into it. It's something that came up during the budget when Director Perez was here through multiple counselors, but efficiency in the routing process, which is something that you touched on in the presentation, I think improving the efficiency and really cleaning that up, which I don't think, prior to this audit, I don't think that the department's belief was that they needed to. But I think, you know, I hope this audit helps inspire that. Cleaning up the routes, being more efficient will lead to buses that are better utilized, and it will lead to a lot of spare buses. One of the things that was, you know, really highlighted on, you know, throughout this whole saga is that the department has way more buses than they said they were going to buy. And what'd you do? Where'd they come from? So I think efficiency with these routes will allow you to, will allow you to find more spares and possibly just even shed buses directly. Something that came up a lot prior to this, and I imagine, you know, obviously I can't speak for my colleague, Councilor Minicello, but I imagine it would have come up tonight, is the out-of-district sped, which I understand in the last couple of years has gone up significantly. Is there any way for us, in anticipation of this, you know, 19 million, which I understand is, you know, reeling it in, but is there any way, or how aggressively can we get a handle on the out-of-district sped and undo the, what I consider to be damaging mistakes of the last couple years of policy?
Yes. So I think there are a lot of ways, and in speaking with some other superintendents and how they have been looking at their transportation, again, we always want to provide our students with what they need in order to be successful. But we also do need to balance that with, making sure that we are looking at our IEPs, we're looking at our out-of-district placements, and that we're kind of, we're reviewing those. I mean, they have a yearly review process sort of built in. Again, we would never want to deny a student something that they need or something that they are entitled to that is making them, so I don't want it to come off as if we are going to be trying to take away any services from students. However, what I have found, and again, speaking, with other superintendents that have sort of done a similar thing, is that there is an opportunity to review some of the, on the back end, some of the who we're transporting and why.
Yeah, and that's, if somebody was always being transported out, then, that's the way it is. But if they were internal and we put them external, and I don't really have a reason for that, that's sort of where I was going, so I understand that. The money cut and returned to the stabilization fund by a unanimously sponsored act of the council during the budget, I just want to stress, and it was laid out in the meeting, a lot of that was cut to say, hey, we want to see how you do without this. Hopefully this inspires a little bit more, oversight, or that this, improve, basically forces some efficiencies. But not all of it. Some of it was cut detailing specific things that the council had concerns or objections to in non-net, with the intent that it would not be returned. So it was not the lion's share of it, but it is something I think worth just checking up on, because we do have that in the records. Things like uniforms for the bus drivers, stuff like that. And then, as it's been mentioned by quite a few of my colleagues, $5 million at this point in time is a lot. And it, we don't have a lot of answers as to where it would come from, aside from, answers that aren't very pretty. And that would be departments that have already shed a lot in this last year in order to see the school department's budget go up as a whole. So I can only speak for myself. I hope some of my colleagues would agree with me. But I can say that before $5 million, before $500,000 is considered, the department, should have a very long internal examination and to see what can be found within. It is the biggest it's ever been. It has a lot of, what we would consider waste, and that is coming from a view of departments that are smaller, that have lower salaries, and departments that, as we saw in this budget, get cut in order to fund the schools. And yeah, safety and security of the children is the highest priority. I'm not going to argue that, but I am going to point out, size differences between, and workloads between city and school HR, between parks and recreation and groundskeeping. In these various roles, where I would just stress that $5 million, if it's going to be found anywhere, your best bet is within the walls of the school department already. But I know that's way out, but that's all I have. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. I think it says 11 something, right?
Motion to recommend favorably?
Second.
Did you want to postpone?
No, actually.
Yeah, sorry,
no.
I withdraw my motion.
Hold on a second, because I think I had a little note here saying that I'd reach out to Counselor Minicello tomorrow to reach out directly to the superintendent if any of his concerns was not addressed tonight. we can always, when it comes back to the full city council, we can always readdress it back to.
Yeah. Motion to recommend favorably.
Motion has been properly made in second to submit 25 to the full committee, the city council, for its appreciation. All those in favor of recommending 25 favorably? All those opposed? It carries. And Madam Superintendent, I don't think when you were going through your training to become a superintendent, you ever thought that one of those requirements was going to be for you to be a CEO of a transportation company, but, you know, here we are.
Here we are.
We got to make lemonades with the lemons that we got, you know, so. Does anybody else have anything else that we want to bring up, Councilor Fowle?
Just a reminder to the Ordinance Committee, 6 PM Thursday, the 21st, this Thursday, 6 PM Ordinance Committee here.
Anybody else? Having no further business for the people of the city of Brockton, this meeting is